Maul Shadow Lord has come to a close, and we were introduced to a new character called Devon. This has raised a lot of speculation whether or not the show would follow in the footsteps of George Lucas's original idea for the sequel trilogy, where Darth Maul would have been the villain with Darth Talon as his apprentice. Thus, in this video, we'll cover the entire backstories and entire lives of these two in chronological order, starting off with Maul and then Darth Talon to see what could have been and what potential lies ahead. Chapter 1. Chosen by Darth Sidious. The year was 54 BBY, and the world of Dathomir will forever be changed by the birth of a young Zabrak boy. Now, Dathomir is unlike most worlds in the galaxy. It is ruled by a matriarchal system with Mother Talzin, a witch from the unknown regions, leading the Night Sisters. Meanwhile, the Zabrak males born were secondary to the Night Sisters, serving only as foot soldiers and to propagate their species. Nonetheless, this boy was born to none other than Mother Talzin, though he was never treated as a treasured son. But Talzin was always away with the Night Sisters in their village, which was separated from where the Night Brothers lived. As such, the boy was forced to take care of his younger and weaker blood brothers, Feral and Savage Opress. While this boy himself had a nickname, he'd forgotten it due to the events that soon followed the day he received his tattoos during his first birthday. The conditions he was forced to live under as a Night Brother filled this boy with anger. He grew up with an inner rage he could not quell. As a result, he was often the angriest among the young Dathomirian Zabraks. But while he may have been angry, he also felt a strong connection to nature and the forest just outside their home. He was Force-sensitive, a gift that came from his mother, who herself was strong in the Force. But Talzin and the other Night Sisters used their gifts in the Force in another way. They were masters of magic, a power akin to witchcraft instead of the traditional Force powers. It was the Night Sisters' magic that drew Darth Sidious's interest. The Sith, who craved absolute power above everything, longed for the powers the Night Sisters possessed. Talzin, in turn, wanted a piece of the dark side power the Sith were masters of. As a result, the Talzin formed an alliance with Sidious, often exchanging knowledge with each other, but only to such a point where the two were left wanting more from each other. Sidious often visited Dathomir, and he was quick to notice the young Dathomirian boy who often kept to himself, hiding in his room instead of speaking to the mysterious man. The boy often feared the growing bond between the man and his mother, seemingly understanding that his future would eventually get tied to this enigmatic figure. As such, the boy was often angry, unable to understand how he felt about his mother and the Sith Lord, who was growing closer and closer to her. But Sidious was quick to notice the growing anger within this boy. So, wanting this anger to grow to fuel his powers in the dark side, Sidious ordered Talzin to give her son to a handler, who would then mistreat him. In return, Talzin was supposed to become Sidious's apprentice. Overhearing the conversation, the boy ran angrily into the forest, where he stayed the entire night until he returned the next morning. Upon his return, the boy was given to the handler, who threw him into a pit without allowing him to say goodbye to his mother. Throughout his ordeal, the handler mistreated the boy, putting him through countless abuse, all for the sake of appeasing the Dark Lord. After the pit, the boy was given to the Keeper's two sons, who abused him just as much as their father did. When he was hungry, the boy was not even allowed a good meal. He only ate the scraps the handler's sons did not want. The anger in the boy's heart eventually evolved into full-blown resentment for everything in life. His perceptions on life changed, making it hard for him to understand the concept of familial love. He also began to hate his mother, believing that Talzin abandoned him. But these were all part of Sidious's plans. The boy's hatred manifested through the dark side, and he would practice his powers whenever he had a chance. As the boy's powers evolved, his resilience also grew. The handler's sons stopped beating him upon realizing their physical abuse no longer worked on him. Eventually, rumors spread that a man would arrive for an event called the Selection, where he would acquire a warrior from the Night Brothers. However, the boy's keeper refused to allow him to join, angering him further. He used his powers to break the lock on his door to join the Selection. But when he arrived at the arena, he found out that the man looking for a warrior was none other than Sidious, the figure responsible for his abuses. Angered by the sight of the man who ruined his life, the boy used the dark side to choke his keeper and his sons, all in front of the Dark Lord and Talzin. Pleased at what he saw, Sidious declared the boy the winner of the Selection. He named him his new apprentice, much to the disappointment of Talzin, who thought she would be his apprentice. Despite hating the man who had now become his master, the boy left Dathomir with Sidious. Meanwhile, Talzin swore she would one day get her son back and avenge Sidious's treachery. By the way, we're having a special offer for our Shadow Menace and Attractive Assassin Dallin sabers in this video. Use the code DALLIN10 to get 10% off any of these sabers and also get 2 free combat sabers for a limited time only when getting the Shadow Menace saber. Now let's get back to the video. Chapter 2. Serving the Sith. Under the tutelage of Darth Sidious, the boy from Dathomir transitioned into a weapon for the Sith through years of brutal instruction. He trained as an apprentice, a warrior, and an assassin, eventually receiving the title of Darth Maul from his master. For many years, Maul worked to become an acrobatic warrior who was relentless against his enemies. He learned to use a dual-bladed lightsaber, and he eventually crafted his own using ancient plans provided by his master. Sidious had hidden these plans in a forgotten entrance within the Sith archives to ensure their secrecy. Maul used pieces that he stole or acquired through various means to build his weapon. He reflected on the amount of pain and blood that went into its construction while he sat in the darkness before a summit in the Kamel sector. The majority of the blood spilled during its creation belonged to others and not to Maul himself. On top of his lightsaber training, he also learned various martial arts through the use of specialized droids designed to push his body to its absolute physical limits. During his training, Sidious took Maul to the planet of Malachor to witness the sight of a great battle between the Jedi and the Sith. Under the supervision of his master, Maul learned to master his anger and let it burn within him. He began to turn that anger into a focused and potent hate. Sidious forced Maul to breathe in the ashes of fallen Sith warriors who died when an ancient weapon was activated in the temple on the planet. While he breathed in the ash, Maul experienced visions of his Sith predecessors being struck down by the Jedi. He felt the phantom pain of every saber strike as if he were dying alongside his fallen brothers during that ancient war. This training made Maul long for revenge against the Jedi Order, which had defeated the Sith a millennium before. Alongside Sidious, Maul hoped to destroy the Jedi and restore the Sith to their former power in the galaxy. He viewed himself as the instrument of a long-delayed justice for his order. But Maul felt a personal hatred for the Jedi that went beyond his official Sith duties. He was filled with rage when he realized that the Jedi never came for him when he was a child on Dathomir, as it was customary for the Jedi to take children they sensed were sensitive to the Force. But for him, he did not know if they found him unworthy or if they simply ignored his existence, and this perceived neglect fueled his internal fire and hatred toward them. Maul slowly counted the days until he could have his revenge on the members of the Order. At the same time, he grew impatient with the slow planning of his master, and he resented the pain he felt while waiting for the time to unleash himself on the galaxy. Several years into his training, Maul became increasingly impatient for a real confrontation with the Jedi. He enjoyed hunting wild game and stalking Jedi like Kat Kinn and her Padawan in the shadows of Coruscant. Shortly after that, Sidious sent Maul to kill Kellick's pirates, where he learned a young Jedi Padawan was being auctioned. Maul killed the witnesses and hired bounty hunters, including Cad Bane, to locate the Padawan. After a brawl on Nar Shaddaa, they tortured a droid to find the auction in the Drazkel system. Maul and his bounty hunter allies traveled to a space station for an auction held by Zevs Rexus, where a Twi'lek Padawan named Eldracatus was the prize. The Zabrak used a fake name to infiltrate the event, and he located the girl in a cell. He waited for a group of Muggins to win the auction, and then he ambushed them to take the Padawan. Zrexus rigged their shuttle with an explosive, which forced a crash on a moon. On the surface, Maul gave the girl her lightsaber so they could defeat the hunters sent to kill them. Once the hunters fell, Maul and Catus engaged in a duel. The Padawan used a landslide to bury him, but Maul emerged and he killed her with his blade. He later executed Zrexus to keep the Sith's secret safe. Sidious was pleased when Maul confessed his hunger to kill more Jedi, as it was not too long after that the apprentice would soon kill a true and experienced Jedi. Chapter 3. Revealing the Sith to the Jedi. Just before the tensions between the Trade Federation and the Republic intensified, Maul assumed a disguise and formed a fake cartel to intercept Skarn's shipments alongside a man sensitive in the Force named Zek Pero. After fighting several buyers, Maul killed Pero with a piece of metal and returned to his master. Sidious voiced his concerns about these antics, comparing his apprentice to the foolish Pero. They soon traveled to Malachor, where Maul inhaled the ashes of dead Sith and experienced a vision. There, Maul appeared as a Jedi, but his disgust for Jedi idolizers led him to slaughter a group of Zabraks. He emerged understanding that rage alone could not defeat the Jedi. Later, Maul went to the planet Quinn to investigate pirate leader Zilastra and her plans against the Jedi Council. While Sidious appeared as a senator to speak with a Jedi Siniskull through a hologram, Maul revealed himself and used the Force to lift the confused official. Then the year 32 BBY came, and the Sith were finally ready to emerge from the shadows of the galaxy. Darth Sidious and his master Darth Plagueis had plotted for decades to bring chaos to the galaxy. Sidious had killed Plagueis to be the one to carry out the plans himself. He was now prepared to finally put their plans into motion, and the perfect weapon for the early phase of the plot to destroy the Jedi was already in his hands. Darth Maul lived for the chance to kill Jedi, and he gladly served as the primary weapon for his master. Sidious was secretly Senator Sheev Palpatine, a politician from the world of Naboo, and he orchestrated a conflict between the Trade Federation and his home planet. The Federation felt angry about new taxes on trade routes, so they blockaded Naboo with their massive ships and battle droid armies. The Supreme Chancellor sent Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi to negotiate, but the Federation tried to kill them on the orders of Sidious. The Jedi escaped to the planet's surface, where they rescued Queen Padme Amidala and fled into space. This escape frustrated the Sith, because they needed the Queen to sign a treaty that would make their illegal invasion look legal to the rest of the Republic. Sidious commanded Maul to find the Queen and her Jedi protectors at any cost, opening the Sith up to their eventual revelation to the Jedi. This led him to the remote desert world of Tatooine. One of Maul's search droids eventually spotted the Queen's ship just as it prepared for departure. With that information, Maul mounted his speeder bike, and he raced across the dunes toward his targets with his red lightsaber ready. He arrived just in time to find Qui-Gon Jinn and a young boy named Anakin Skywalker walking toward the ship. Without hesitation, Maul attacked the Jedi to finally unveil the Sith to their ancient enemies. The two warriors fought a brief but violent duel in the desert heat, and Maul used his physical strength to pressure the older Jedi. Qui-Gon struggled to keep up with the intensity of the Sith, who was younger and more energetic. Just as Maul prepared to strike a final blow, the Queen's ship flew over them, allowing Qui-Gon to jump onto the boarding ramp. The ship escaped into the sky, leaving Maul alone on the sand with his growing anger. This encounter revealed the existence of the Sith to the Jedi Order for the first time in 1,000 years. Nevertheless, the Jedi Council was yet to ascertain whether or not it was indeed the Sith who attacked Qui-Gon. Meanwhile, Maul felt frustrated by his failure to kill the Jedi, but he did not realize that the boy he saw would one day become a powerful Sith himself. The dark side continued to grow within Maul, and he prepared for the final battle that would determine the fate of the Naboo system. Chapter 4: Maul's Death. The Jedi and the Queen escaped to Coruscant, and Sidious used his identity as Palpatine to manipulate Amidala. He convinced her to call for a vote of no confidence against Chancellor Valorum, and this led to a new election where Palpatine was the favored candidate to lead the Republic. Meanwhile, Maul returned to Naboo under the orders of his master, and he waited for the Jedi and the Queen to return so they could face the Federation occupation forces. Maul felt anticipation for the coming confrontation as he spent his time choosing the exact location where he would engage in his duel with the Jedi. But then, the Naboo and Gungans joined forces, leading the droid army into a battle far away from the capital city. The Queen and the Jedi used this distraction to move into the city and regain control of the palace. When Maul arrived on Naboo, the Neimoidians tried to offer him comfort, but he ignored them to focus on his task. He decided to lure the Jedi into the narrow corridors and catwalks inside the power generation facility, where he practiced with his lightsaber. He examined the deep chute in the final room and decided that the hole was not a threat to him. Then Gunray sent him a communication about the landing of the Queen, but Maul told the Neimoidians to let the Naboo and Jedi come to them. The battle reached the royal palace as Maul stood waiting in the hangar for Jinn and Kenobi. The Sith Lord fought both Jedi at once before the fight moved into the generator complex. Maul dominated the duel through his aggression and mastery of the double-bladed lightsaber, a weapon he did not use against Qui-Gon in their first meeting. But he also gave ground so he could lead the Jedi deeper into the facility. He separated the Jedi by knocking Kenobi down, trapping the younger Jedi behind laser walls. Maul took advantage of this moment to fight Jyn alone, using an unorthodox style to hit the Jedi on the face with his lightsaber hilt. The strike stunned Qui-Gon long enough as he dropped his guard before Maul stabbed the Jedi Master. Jyn fell to the ground with a fatal wound as Kenobi watched from behind the energy barriers. When the laser walls deactivated, Kenobi rushed forward to engage Maul. The young Jedi felt anger and grief as he managed to cut Maul's double-bladed lightsaber in half. However, Maul used the Force to push Kenobi over the edge of the reactor shaft, and the Jedi lost his weapon as he fell. Kenobi grabbed a small nozzle and hung there while Maul taunted him. The Sith kicked the lightsaber of the Jedi into the darkness, but Kenobi remained calm and used the Force to leap over Maul. He summoned the lightsaber of his master into his hand mid-air before he sliced through the waist of the Sith Lord. Maul fell down the shaft in 2 pieces, believed to have been killed by Obi-Wan right then and there, as it was impossible for anyone to have survived getting bisected and falling down a deep shaft. On that same day, Palpatine achieved his goal and became the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. The body of the Sith was never found, and Sidious eventually chose Count Dooku to be his new apprentice, while the Council turned their attention to other matters. Chapter 5. Maul survives. Tell me, child, do you know who I am? Do they whisper my name in the classrooms of your academy, down the winding halls of your space station, in the hollows and fields of your farming planet, or across the dunes of your desert home? If they do, what do they say of me? That I was once a great Sith Lord, apprentice to the most powerful being in the galaxy? That I killed the legendary Jedi named Qui-Gon Jinn at the Battle of Naboo? Do they remember my glory? My distinctive black and red skin and horns? My unmatched skill with the double-bladed lightsaber? Or do they just remember how I died? The Sith apprentice may have met a terrible fate on the world of Naboo, but his story did not end with his fall down a deep reactor shaft. While he was cut in half by the blade of a Jedi, the hate and rage within his heart managed to keep his spirit tethered to his broken body. Through a combination of his Dathomirian physiology, the dark side of the Force, and the magic of his mother, the young Zabrak survived even as he tumbled into a trash container. He was eventually dumped on the junkyard world of Lotho Minor, which was a place filled with filth and discarded metal. There, in the dark bowels of the planet, he fashioned a 6-limbed metal apparatus for himself so that he could walk again. But the physical pain and the isolation took a toll on his mind, causing his sanity to slowly slip away over the long years. Throughout the years, the galaxy plunged deeper and deeper into war, as tensions between the Separatists or the Confederacy of Independent Systems had begun to stir. Maul was largely unaware of what was happening throughout the galaxy, or that his rival Obi-Wan Kenobi had taken the young Anakin Skywalker as his apprentice. During Maul's long exile, a group of people led by a droid named Captain Spikewheel arrived on the planet. The group included several individuals who were forced to spend a night on the junkyard world to prove their worth. One of these people, a man named Celes, became separated from his companions and was captured by the crazed Zabrak. The former Sith Lord muttered to himself and chased the others through a dark labyrinth, nearly killing them before he was caught in an electro net by a man named Grits. When they returned to the surface, they discovered that the Zabrak himself had sent a message to lure a ship to the planet because he wanted to escape. The droid captain tried to shoot him, but the fallen Sith destroyed her instead. In the chaos that followed, the ship launched into the sky and the Zabrak fell back to the surface along with Grits. He killed the man shortly after they landed, remaining trapped on the desolate world. Meanwhile, to survive his hunger, the Zabrak made a bargain with a sneaky creature called Morley, who was a sentient anacondan. Morley agreed to bring him food in exchange for the leftovers, and this arrangement lasted for many years. Throughout this time, the former apprentice was driven mad by his despair and his intense desire for revenge against the Jedi who had defeated him. Even while he lived in the shadows of the junk heaps, his mind stayed focused on the face of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Far away from Coruscant, a young Skywalker even used the image of the Sith to train himself in combat, showing that the legacy of the Zabrak was not forgotten. Eventually, the galaxy was split in half as the Separatists launched their attack on the Republic, bringing about the Clone Wars. Count Dooku, who was given the name Darth Tyrannus, led the Separatists under the orders of Darth Sidious, who was secretly Chancellor Palpatine. Dooku, meanwhile, needed a weapon against the Jedi after he abandoned his own apprentice, Asajj Ventress. Mother Talzin forged an alliance with Count Dooku as she had already broken her contract with Sidious when the Sith Lord took Maul away decades ago. Wanting a Zabrak as his new apprentice, he asked Talzin to give him the finest warrior she had. This turned out to be Savage Opress, Maul's blood brother. Talzin used her magic to strengthen Opress's body. Meanwhile, Ventress, who was a Night Sister herself, worked in secret with Opress to eventually try to kill Dooku. However, the two failed as Opress returned to Talzin shortly after Dooku also abandoned him. On Dathomir, Mother Talzin never lost her connection to her son. She eventually told Savage Opress that the lost Sith could be found in the Outer Rim. She gave the younger brother a magical talisman to guide his path, leading him straight to the tunnels of Lotho Minor. When Savage finally found his brother, he saw a man who was barely a shadow of his former self. The Zabrak did not recognize his own kin, and he spent his time sobbing or laughing while muttering about the Jedi. Even at that time, Obi-Wan was the only one occupying the former Darth's mind, as Maul's hatred for his rival kept him alive even at the cost of his sanity. Believing that Morley had failed his brother, Savage killed the Anacondan and took the broken Zabrak back to Dathomir. There, Mother Talzin used her powerful incantations to repair the mind of her son. She then used parts of the destroyed battle droids to give him a new pair of cybernetic legs, finally restoring the warrior so she could seek the revenge he craved for so long. Chapter 6: The Return. It was 20 BBY during the height of the Clone Wars, and Maul regained his sanity with the help of Mother Talzin. He focused his entire being on seeking revenge against Obi-Wan Kenobi for his defeat on Naboo, an event he believed spiraled his life into chaos. At that point, he was no longer a Sith, replaced by Count Dooku at the side of the man he once called Master. But he still believed he and his brother Savage had one more purpose: vengeance on Kenobi. To draw the Jedi out, Maul led his brother to the world of Raydonia, where they slaughtered innocent civilians to send a message to the Jedi Council. Kenobi, who had been apprised by the Jedi Council of Maul's survival, arrived alone to face his old enemy. He faced a disadvantage as the brothers successfully captured him. However, the Jedi was rescued by Asajj Ventress, who also had a falling out with Opress and the Sith. Maul and Kenobi engaged in a lightsaber duel for the first time in over a decade, and the Zabrak used the death of Qui-Gon Jinn to goad the Jedi into a state of anger. This tactic overwhelmed Kenobi, who decided to escape the ship with Ventress before the brothers could finish them. Maul watched them flee, knowing that the pursuit would only fuel his ultimate quest for vengeance. Following the skirmish, Maul spoke to a child about his return to galactic affairs, promising that he would soon expose the Jedi as a false order. The brothers then began a rampage across the galaxy, eventually reaching the Cyblock transfer station. After they defeated the guards, they found a coffer filled with credits. Maul used this moment to demonstrate his superiority over Savage by disarming him in a brief contest of skill. He declared himself the Master and Savage the Apprentice, mimicking the Sith rule of two while also declaring themselves as the real Sith. With their power dynamic established, they traveled to the world of Florum to recruit a pirate crew. Maul bribed a squad of pirates to join his cause, and he killed those who questioned his authority while the pirate leader Hondo Ohnaka watched. The Jedi soon arrived on Florum, led by Kenobi and Adi Gallia. A fierce duel broke out in the pirate base, and Savage managed to kill Gallia by goring her belly with his horns. Facing a 2-on-1 situation, Kenobi lured the brothers into a narrow passage to trim the disadvantage. In doing so, he managed to sever one of Savage's arms during the struggle. Sensing a possible defeat, Maul used the Force to push Kenobi away and caused a cave-in to cover their retreat. As they fled, they realized the pirates had turned against them and rejoined Hondo. One of the pirates used a rocket launcher to damage their ship, as Maul lost one of his legs in the process. The brothers barely escaped the vessel before it crashed into the surface of the planet. Even though Hondo believed the brothers were incinerated, Kenobi suspected that Maul was still alive and plotting his next move. After all, he had seen his lightsaber cutting cleanly through Maul more than a decade ago, only to realize the Zabrak had survived. It would take more than a crash to kill Maul, as Kenobi believed. Chapter 7: The Shadow over Mandalore. Following their recent encounter with Obi-Wan Kenobi, the brothers drifted in the cold void of space, trapped within a damaged escape pod after their narrow flight from the planet Florum. Their oxygen levels dropped until they both fell into a deep unconsciousness, leaving their fate to the will of the stars. It was then that the Mandalorian splinter group known as Death Watch found them. Pre Vizsla, the leader of these warriors, stood over the broken forms of the Zabrak brothers. While his lieutenant, Bo-Katan Kryze, argued for their immediate execution, Vizsla noticed the lightsaber that belonged to Maul, so he decided that any enemy of the Jedi was a potential ally for his cause. The Mandalorians took the unconscious pair back to their hidden base on the moon of Zanbar, where they hoped to find a new weapon against their enemies. The group sought to retake Mandalore from the new Mandalorians, who were allied with the Republic and the Jedi. Vizsla believed that beings trained in the dark side could possibly help them defeat the Jedi and restore tradition to their homeworld. Upon their arrival on their hidden base, medical droids began the difficult task of repairing the shattered bodies of the brothers. Maul received a new pair of mechanical legs that restored him to his natural height, replacing the makeshift limbs gifted to him by Mother Talzin. Savage Opress also underwent surgery to replace his lost arm with a metallic prosthetic. When Maul finally woke, he found himself surrounded by armored Mandalorians. Vizsla and Bo-Katan questioned him, threatening to end the life of his brother if he did not provide answers. Maul spoke with a cold voice, declaring that they were the true lords of the Sith and served no master. He shared his hatred for Obi-Wan Kenobi, a name that resonated deeply with Vizsla. Kenobi once foiled his plan of taking over Mandalore. That's when the Mandalorian leader realized they share a common foe in the Jedi Master, and he ordered the droids to finish their work so that an alliance could be discussed properly. Maul eventually met with Vizsla in a more private setting when the Mandalorian explained the history of Death Watch. He spoke of their exile from Mandalore and their desire to reclaim their warrior heritage from the pacifist government led by Duchess Satine. Maul saw an opportunity to gain the army he needed to exact his revenge. During his last encounter with the Jedi, Maul realized that it would take more than just him and Opress to kill Kenobi, who had the backing of an entire order and an army of clones. That's when he thought he himself also needed his own group to control, making the Death Watch perfect allies. Maul proposed a formal alliance, claiming it was the destiny of the Force for them to join forces. Bo-Katan was skeptical and reminded her leader that previous deals with the Sith only led to betrayal. She insulted the Sith by comparing them to the Jedi. Maul responded by using the Force to choke her, demonstrating his power until the other Mandalorians drew their weapons. He promised that together they would conquer Mandalore and destroy their shared enemies like Count Dooku and Kenobi. Savage Opress soon emerged from his coma and immediately destroyed the droids around him with his new arm. Maul calmed his brother, explaining that the Mandalorians possessed a sense of honor that made them more reliable than the pirates they had previously employed. While Savage viewed honor as a weakness, he followed the lead of his brother. Vizsla announced that his warriors had voted to accept the alliance. Their first move was to build a criminal empire to fund their war and to rival the Sith. They traveled to the volcanic world of Mustafar to confront the leaders of the Black Sun. When the crime lords refused to join them, Maul gave a silent signal to his brother. Savage threw his lightsaber across the room, decapitating the entire council in a single strike. Zaitan Moj, the sole survivor, immediately pledged the Black Sun to the Shadow Collective. Shortly after, the Pike Syndicate also joined their growing ranks on the moon of Zanbar. The Shadow Collective, the name of their new criminal organization, then moved toward the heart of Hutt space on Nal Hutta. They sought to force the Grand Hutt Council into their service, but the Hutts were not easily swayed by threats or displays of power. A fierce battle erupted between the Mandalorians and the hired bounty hunters who guarded the palace. After the defenders were defeated, the brothers captured Oruba the Hutt to extract information about the other Hutts. Oruba revealed that they had fled to Tatooine to seek refuge at the Palace of Jabba. Once the information was secured, Maul signaled Savage to execute the Hutt. The fleet then descended upon Tatooine, overwhelming the guards of Jabba until the mighty crime lord had no choice but to join the alliance. To further solidify his grip on the underworld, Maul turned his attention to smaller crime families like the Morubas. While sitting in a cantina and discussing their plans to win over their leader Jan, they were overheard by a spy. The informant warned Jan, who prepared a trap involving poison. Savage led the ground assault on the stronghold while Maul allowed himself to be captured, It was a calculated risk intended to draw the enemy out into the open. As the battle raged, Maul broke free and seized control of the throne room. By the time the fighting stopped, the Marubas were under his thumb. The Shadow Collective was now a force that could challenge the Republic itself, and Maul stood at its center, ready to return to Mandalore and claim his ultimate prize while the galaxy trembled. Maul commanded the Shadow Collective with a single goal, which was to seize control of Mandalore and dismantle the rule of Duchess Satine. He orchestrated a plan where his criminal allies attacked the capital city of Sundari, which made the Duchess appear incompetent. As the citizens grew desperate, Pre Vizsla and the Death Watch arrived to drive the criminals away, earning the trust of the Mandalorian people. However, Pre Vizsla and Bo-Katan betrayed Maul and Savage Opress by arresting them shortly after their victory. Maul expected this betrayal, and used his time in prison to locate a new ally, eventually finding the disgraced former Prime Minister Almec. After the Sith brothers broke out of their cells, they recruited Almec to serve as their political puppet. Maul then entered the Grand Salon and challenged Pre Vizsla to a formal duel for leadership of the planet. They fought a brutal battle until Maul finally gained the upper hand and decapitated Vizsla with the Darksaber. The Death Watch's leader's symbol of power and the ancient lightsaber once held by Tar Vizsla, a legendary Mandalorian Jedi. This act of violence granted Maul command over the Death Watch, although Bo-Katan and her forces refused to bow to a foreign outsider and escaped. Maul placed Almec back in power as the Prime Minister, but it was the Sith Lord who held the true authority over the world. Through blood and manipulation, Maul finally achieved the power he desired, even as the Mandalorian people remained unaware that a Dark Warrior was their true ruler. Chapter 8: Maul's Revenge. Following the successful coup on Mandalore, Maul now had the power to not only challenge the Sith, but also force the Republic to take notice of what is happening on that part of the galaxy. But his primary goal was always to take revenge on Kenobi, with the coup on Mandalore being one of the ways to secure that aspiration. So, when Maul discovered that Duchess Satine Kryze tried to escape and sent a distress message to the Jedi, he saw an opportunity to exact his revenge. He knew of the long history between Kenobi and the Duchess, as they were once close to being lovers when they were younger. Knowing how much Obi-Wan cared about Satine, Maul decided to use her as bait for his old enemy. Since Mandalore was officially neutral in the war, the Jedi Council refused to send help, and Maul correctly predicted that Kenobi would come alone. Kenobi eventually arrived and freed his friend, but Maul and his loyal warriors chased them through the city to their ship. The Mandalorians destroyed the vessel with missiles, and Kenobi was captured along with Satine after a brief struggle against Maul and Savage Opress. In the royal throne room, Maul used the Force to hold Satine while he tried to provoke Kenobi into using the dark side. Kenobi refused to give in and spoke about Maul's past on Dathomir, claiming the dark side was a curse forced on him by the Night Sisters. This made Maul very angry, and he reminded Kenobi that the Jedi was the one truly responsible for his years of suffering in exile. Even though a part of him knew that it was all the machinations of Sidious and his father that led to the pain he suffered, Maul still channeled all his hatred toward the Jedi, because that was the easier way out for him. The focus point of that anger was Obi-Wan, whom he also wanted to be full of the anger that led Maul to the dark side. Maul wanted Kenobi to feel the same agony that he had endured for over a decade, so he ignited the Darksaber and stabbed the Duchess through the chest. Satine died in the arms of the man she loved. The Dark Warrior could have ordered Kenobi's death right then and there, or even killed him with a quick strike. Instead, he wanted Obi-Wan to suffer from the fact that he had lost one of the most important people in his life. Maul wanted to savor a slow but painful plunge into despair instead of killing the Jedi. With that, he ordered the guards to take Kenobi to the prison to live with his loss. He wanted the Jedi to rot in his own misery, but Kenobi never fell into a pit of despair or even flirted with the dark side. To that end, Maul failed to extract the reaction he wanted from Obi-Wan, even if he did break his heart by killing the Duchess. But before Maul could do any more damage to his rival, the Jedi eventually managed to escape with help from Bo-Katan Kryze, who revealed that she was actually the sister of the fallen Duchess. Chapter 9: The Master Humbles the Student. Following Obi-Wan's escape from Mandalore, Bo-Katan Kryze launched a civil war intending to take the planet back from the Death Watch. The Civil War reached a bloody peak as Bo-Katan and her Night Owls engaged the Mandalorian supercommandos in the streets of the capital city. While the Mandalorians fought for the future of their world, a shadow fell over the royal palace in the form of Darth Sidious. The Sith Lord had learned of the activities of Maul through the reports of the Jedi, and he recognized that his former apprentice had become a dangerous rival in the underworld. From afar, he sensed the growing power the Zabrak warrior had been amassing. While he knew that he still had more power both in the dark side and the political sense, Sidious did not want to risk the possibility of his former apprentice challenging his might. The Dark Lord resorted into taking matters into his own hands, leaving the comforts of Coruscant, a rarity for someone of his political stature. As Sidious approached Mandalore in a secret journey aboard his private shuttle, Maul sensed the arrival of his old master. He prepared to face the man who had shaped him, but at the same time he feared the power of the man who taught him everything he knew, seemingly understanding that he was not yet powerful enough to truly challenge the Dark Lord. Upon their decade-long reunion, Maul claimed that he had built his empire as a gift for Sidious, but the Dark Lord saw through the deception. Sidious told Maul that he had grown into a rival, challenging the rule of two with the growing might of his Shadow Collective. With no hesitation, he attacked Maul and Savage in what initially looked like a disadvantage to the much older Darksider. However, Sidious looked relaxed, even happy during their duel. He more than matched the raw might of the Zabrak warriors, often taking advantage of Savage's lack of skill and experience and Maul's conflicted allegiance. The duel was swift and brutal, and the overwhelming power of the Sith Master was clear from the very first strike. Sidious used the Force to push Maul against a cold stone wall, and he left the younger brother to face him alone. Savage fought with all the strength he possessed, but he was no match for the most powerful being in the galaxy. Sidious drove his blades through the chest of younger brother as Maul could only watch as his brother fell, with the green mist of the Night Sister magic escape the body of the dying warrior. Savage returned to his original form while apologizing to Maul for his failure before he died. Maul's grief quickly turned into a cold rage. While he was conflicted earlier, he was now determined to end his former master once and for all as he used everything he knew to try to defeat Sidious. He managed to hold his own for a short time, but the skill and experience of Sidious were far beyond anything Maul could overcome. The Sith Master disarmed him with ease before using the Force to slam the Dathomirian against the hard surfaces of the room until he was broken and bleeding. Defeated and disgraced, Maul begged for mercy from the man who had stolen his life, but Sidious reminded him that mercy was not the way of the Sith. He tortured Maul with blasts of Force lightning, but he kept him alive because he had a greater purpose for the broken warrior. In truth, Sidious planned to use Maul as a lure to draw Mother Talzin out of hiding. Earlier in the war, Count Dooku sent General Grievous and a massive droid army to Dathomir to destroy the Night Sisters after Talzin betrayed the other Sith Lord. However, Talzin used her magic to escape certain death, hiding in the form of a spirit while trying to regain her strength. Knowing that Talzin still cared about her only remaining son, Sidious took his prisoner to the remote prison of Stygian Prime. The Spire was a fortress located deep within the mountains, and it was there that Count Dooku arrived to continue the work of his master. Dooku interrogated Maul about the Shadow Collective, using his own dark powers to try and extract the names of the allies who supported the Zabrak. Maul remained defiant despite the constant pain, refusing to betray the remnants of his criminal empire. The Sith continued their games of torture, but their session was interrupted when a hole was blown into the side of the prison wall. Rook Kast and Gar Saxon led a daring rescue mission with the Death Watch, pulling Maul from the wreckage of his cell. They escaped the mountain fortress and fled to the world of Zanbar, where the rest of the Mandalorian forces waited for their leader. Maul contacted Prime Minister Almec, and he realized that his freedom was a sign of the loyalty of his people. He reclaimed the Darksaber and prepared his warriors for the war that was coming, but the Separatist fleet was already closing in on their position. General Grievous arrived with a massive droid army to turn the moon of Zanbar into a field of fire, as the two forces collided in a desperate battle. Maul fought desperately as he engaged the droid general in a fierce duel, but the mechanical strength of Grievous forced him back. The Mandalorians suffered heavy losses against the endless waves of droids, forcing Maul to realize that he had to retreat if he wanted his people to survive. He ordered his ships to flee the system. However, instead of giving chase, Grievous allowed them to go according to the orders of Dooku. The Sith allowed Maul to escape because they knew he would seek help from his mother on Dathomir to set the final stages of the trap for Mother Talzin. Chapter 10. The Alliance with Dooku. The shadow of defeat hung over Maul as he fled the world of Zanbar, reaching out through the Force to find the spirit of Mother Talzin. She appeared to him as a ghostly figure in a cloud of green smoke, guiding her son away from the trap she knew Darth Sidious was setting for them. Talzin directed Maul to the world of Ord Mantell, where the Black Sun maintained a secret stronghold and plenty of resources for his Shadow Collective. She wanted him to lure Count Dooku and General Grievous into a trap of his own, believing that Sidious would not expect such a bold move from a hunted fugitive. Talzin remained hidden from the front lines, knowing the Sith Lord sought her destruction above all else because of her ancient magic. Maul arrived on the planet and met with his allies, including Zitan Maj of the Black Sun and Fife of the Pike Syndicate. He laid out his plan to turn the planet into a killing ground for the Separatist droid army, even though his allies felt nervous about the cost. While his allies harbored doubts about facing the full might of the Separatists, Maul remained confident in his tactical superiority and the strength of his combined forces. To bolster his army, Talzin sent a group of Night Brother warriors led by Brother Viscus to serve as Maul's personal guard during the upcoming struggle. The Separatist fleet soon arrived in orbit, prompting Maul to take to the skies in Mandalorian warships to strike at the heart of the enemy fleet before they could deploy their full strength. High above the planet, Maul led a boarding action against the massive command ship of General Grievous and cornered the cyborg general. Maul gave his enemy a choice between a quick death or deactivating the entire droid army currently fighting on the surface. Grievous chose to live, sending the command signal that rendered his entire army useless in an instant. Down on the surface, the tide of the battle turned as the droids went silent and fell where they stood. Count Dooku fought valiantly against the Night Brothers, but he was eventually overwhelmed and captured by the Shadow Collective forces. With both the General and the Count in his possession, Maul contacted Talzin to report his victory over their enemies. They shared a moment of triumph, believing they finally had the leverage needed to draw Sidious out and exact their long-awaited revenge for years of suffering. Maul then ordered his fleet to abandon Ord Mantell, leaving behind almost no evidence of their presence as they retreated to a secret Mandalorian supply outpost known as Vizsla Keep 9 to prepare for the next phase. Inside the outpost, Maul contacted his former master to boast of his valuable prizes. Sidious showed no concern for his subordinates, telling Maul to execute them both as they were no longer of any use to his grand design. Maul ignored the order, instead turning his attention to Dooku in an attempt to turn the Count against their mutual master. He spoke of the betrayal they both suffered while Mother Talzin appeared through her magic to reveal the history of Sidious's many lies. She told Dooku how Sidious stole Maul from her when he was just a child, and now he was already planning to replace Dooku with a newer apprentice from the Jedi Order. Before a true alliance could be formed, a Republic strike team led by Jedi Masters Obi-Wan Kenobi, Aayla Secura, Tiplee, and Mace Windu attacked the base. The Jedi had tracked the collective from Ord Mantell and arrived with a force of clones to end the conflict. In the chaos of the assault, General Grievous managed to reach an escape pod and fled into the stars alone. Maul and Dooku found themselves forced to fight side by side against the Jedi to survive the night. The battle ended when Rook cast using an explosive to stun the Jedi, providing the window Maul and Dooku needed to flee the outpost. They escaped together, heading toward the red sands of Dathomir for a final confrontation with the Sith Master. Chapter 11. The Final Confrontation with Sidious. Maul fled from the outpost and directed his followers toward Dathomir, while he dealt with the growing concerns of the Pikes and the Black Sun. These criminals worried that his personal vendetta against the Sith was ruining their common interest, but Maul assured them that they would receive their payment once Sidious was dead. He ordered Saxon to keep the syndicates under control before he turned his attention to his prisoner. Maul told Count Dooku that he was well aware of the deception, and he knew that the Count was only pretending to be an ally on the orders of his master. When they reached the surface of the planet, Brother Viscus greeted them and led the group to the heart of the stronghold. Mother Talzin appeared in the cloud of green smoke and immediately began to drain the life force from Dooku because she needed a powerful sacrifice to regain her physical body. However, the ritual was cut short when a massive explosion tore through the temple. Darth Sidious and General Grievous arrived to reclaim their pawn, and the Dark Lord reminded Maul that there was only one plan that truly mattered in the galaxy. A great battle began, with Talon taking control of Dooku's physical form to trade blows with Sidious. Maul fought against the cyborg general before he eventually pushed the droid commander away from the central chamber. Sidious used his lightning to overwhelm the witch, which forced her to leave Dooku and manifest her true self again. Maul begged his mother to take his own life force so she could survive the onslaught, but Talon refused to let her son perish. She used her magic to push Maul away from the fighting. The Mandalorian warriors quickly dragged him toward their waiting ships. As he was being pulled away, Maul watched as General Grievous returned and drove his lightsabers through the chest of Mother Talzin. Maul escaped into space while the Separatist army destroyed the remnants of his collective. To Sidious, the mission was a success, because his former apprentice was now broken and alone with no power left to challenge the Sith, even if he did regain his power on Mandalore. Despite failing to defeat his former master, Maul was far from a defeated man. His strength and resolve may have weakened, but he was still prepared to formulate new plans for the future of this syndicate, as well as the darkness that was to come in the galaxy. He returned to the world of Mandalore with his loyal forces, staying in hiding while he managed his criminal empire. The Pike Syndicate and Black Sun eventually rejoined his Shadow Collective, and he also formed a partnership with the group known as Crimson Dawn. One day, a major shipment of spice was lost when a pilot named Trace Martez dumped the cargo during a flight. This mistake brought Maul into a hologram meeting with the Pike leader named Marg Krim. Maul was displeased with the delay, telling Krim that any failure could ruin his entire plan for the galaxy. Krim defended his actions by mentioning that the Republic was raiding his shipments on Coruscant. Maul immediately asked if any Jedi were involved in these raids. As they spoke, Maul sensed something and looked toward a set of pipes where Ahsoka Tano was hiding. He did not find her, so he focused his attention back on the hologram. He warned Krim that Crimson Dawn would take over the spice trade if another delay occurred. After giving this warning, Maul ended the call and returned to his preparations. The former Sith apprentice continued to wait for the right moment to reveal his presence to his enemies. Chapter 12: The Siege of Mandalore. The Clone Wars were nearing its end, with the Jedi and the Republic pushing the Separatists further and further to the edge of defeat. However, the Jedi had been kept busy. The Chancellor, just before he was captured by the Separatists, ordered the deployment of more Jedi and clones to the farthest reaches of the Separatist territories. Meanwhile, the main force was on Coruscant when the Separatists launched a daring attack on the capital in hopes of turning the tide of the war to their favor. On Mandalore, Maul experienced a dark vision that revealed the truth of the future. He saw that Anakin Skywalker was the key to the ultimate victory of Darth Sidious. He realized the young Jedi was destined to become the new apprentice of his former master, so he created a plan to change the galaxy at the edge of the city. He intended to lure both Obi-Wan Kenobi and Skywalker to Mandalore, where he hoped to kill the boy and strike a blow against Sidious while also reclaiming his revenge against Kenobi. During the final days of the Clone Wars, Maul was under siege by the forces of Bo-Katan Kryze and a division of clones led by Rex and Ahsoka Tano. As the Battle of Coruscant raged on, Skywalker sent Ahsoka and a portion of the 501st Legion to Mandalore to assist Bo-Katan in their fight for the planet's liberty. Maul received word that a Jedi had arrived on the planet, and he assumed his old enemy Kenobi had come to face him at last. But when the Jedi appeared, Maul was disappointed to find it was only the former Padawan Ahsoka Tano. Maul questioned the girl and asked why she had come, all while expressing his frustration that Kenobi and Skywalker were not there. Ahsoka explained that Kenobi was occupied with a more pressing engagement as he was busy rescuing the Chancellor and fighting Count Dooku during the Battle of Coruscant. Maul dismissed Ahsoka's request to surrender as a foolish gesture, and he told her that the Jedi Order and the Republic would soon fall into ruin. He revealed that Darth Sidious would soon take control of everything to bring the era of the Jedi to an end. Just as they spoke, Commander Rex and his troops from the Grand Army of the Republic arrived and opened fire, which forced Maul and his Mandalorians to retreat. During the chaos, Maul managed to capture an ARC trooper named Jesse, bringing the prisoner back for a brutal interrogation. He used a powerful mind probe to look into the mind of the soldier to extract every detail about Ahsoka and the current state of the war. As the battle raged, Maul contacted the leaders of the Shadow Collective to give them his final orders. He spoke with Marg Krim and Zaitan Maj and Dryden Voss, telling them to take their syndicates into hiding to survive the coming change. Gar Saxon returned after silencing the great leader Almec, and Maul thanked his loyal Mandalorian followers for their dedication. He then told Saxon and Rook Kast that the galaxy was about to be remade, urging them to seize as much power as they could. He promised them that they would have the chance to die as warriors on the field of battle before preparing for the final meeting with his enemies. He sat upon the throne and waited for Ahsoka and Bo-Katan to arrive before handing Jesse back to have an opportunity to talk to Ahsoka. Once they were alone, Maul spoke to Ahsoka about the failures of the Jedi, and he reminded her that they were both outcasts who had been abandoned. He told her that justice was about to disappear before asking her to join him so that they could destroy Darth Sidious together. Ahsoka asked him what he wanted with Skywalker, and Maul explained that the boy was the key to the destruction of the galaxy. He revealed that Sidious intended to make Skywalker his next apprentice, but Ahsoka refused to believe his words and accused him of lying. The time for talking was over as the two engaged in a duel. As the two skilled warriors crossed blades, Maul continued to try to convince Ahsoka to join his side. But the Togruta warrior was incorruptible as Ahsoka took the fight to the top of a city building. While the Mandalorian forces under Gar Saxon were being defeated by the Republic clones, Maul chose to abandon his men to save himself. He told Saxon that a ship was coming for him, leaving the commander to be captured by the soldiers shortly afterward. When Ahsoka finally caught up with Maul at the top of the structure. As the escape ship for Maul arrived, he managed to take Ahsoka's weapons to destroy the beam she stood upon, leaving her trapped and cornered. Maul offered her one last chance to join him, but she refused his offer without any doubt. This made Maul angry, and he attacked her again with his blade. However, Ahsoka turned things around and took the upper hand, pushing Maul over the edge. She did not let him fall to his death, but instead used the Force to hold him in the air. Maul told her to let him die because he did not want to be a prisoner, but she refused as the gunships arrived to take him into custody. As he was led away, Maul shouted that everyone would soon die and that they had no idea what was coming, though the clones did not listen to his warnings. Chapter 13. Order 66. Shortly after the former Sith Lord's defeat, Maul was placed inside a special Mandalorian vault that was built to hold those who could use the Force. He was soon taken onto the Star Destroyer called the Tribunal. The ship was commanded by Ahsoka, who had been told by the Jedi Council to bring him to Coruscant to stand trial for his many crimes. However, during the trip, the hidden Sith Lord known as Palpatine revealed himself as Darth Sidious and gave the order to kill all Jedi. This was called Order 66, and it caused Rex and the other clones to turn on Ahsoka because of the inhibitor chips secretly installed in their heads during their creation. Maul felt the change in the Force from his cell, realizing that his former master was finally taking control of the galaxy. Two clones came to his room to kill him because Sidious wanted his former apprentice dead once and for all. Before they could fire their guns, Ahsoka arrived and knocked them out, and she then freed Maul from his restraints. Maul was surprised that she was still alive, as he laughed at the cleverness of Sidious for using the Jedi's own army to destroy them. He asked Ahsoka to join him, but she said no and told him he was only there to cause trouble and distract the clones. She did not give him a weapon to use, leaving him to fight his way through the ship with nothing but his hands and his power. Even without a lightsaber, Maul was very dangerous as he moved through the ship. He used the Force to pull metal plates from the walls, using them to kill the clones in his path. He showed no mercy to the soldiers who tried to stop him, and he even pulled the arm off a trooper through a closing door so that he could steal a radio. This allowed him to hear what the clones were saying to each other as they hunted for Ahsoka. Maul then went to the room where the hyperdrive was kept. He then used the Force to tear the controls apart and pull the hyperdrive machinery down, which caused the ship to stop moving through hyperspace. The vessel began falling toward a moon because it was caught in its gravity. As the ship began to crash, Maul went to the hangar to find a way off the vessel. He saw a shuttle and started running toward it, but Ahsoka saw him and tried to stop him. Maul used the Force to push her away, telling her that he was only doing what she wanted by causing chaos. Ahsoka almost killed him with her lightsabers, but she had to stop when Rex and her droids were in danger. Maul used this moment to get into the shuttle and fly away into hyperspace, hoping to build his power once again. While these events happened on the ship, a different battle took place on the world of Mustafar. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker fought each other in a mining facility. During this fight, Obi-Wan felt the great hatred coming from his former friend, which was a feeling he had known before. This hatred was very strong, and it reminded Obi-Wan of the dark feelings he had sensed from Maul and other dark side users in the past. It was a dark time for the galaxy, as the Jedi were hunted and the Sith took control of everything. The galaxy was soon plunged into chaos shortly after the events of Order 66, with Anakin completely transforming into the cybernetic Sith Lord called Darth Vader. Meanwhile, Sidious sat at the top of a newly christened galactic empire as Emperor Palpatine. Maul's nightmare had come true, and he could not do anything to stop his former master from realizing the dream they once shared together. Chapter 14: The Crime Lord. As Maul had foreseen, Anakin Skywalker fell to the dark side and became the new apprentice to Darth Sidious under the name of Darth Vader. With this new student by his side, Sidious established the Galactic Empire and began the Great Jedi Purge, which was the next step in his plan for the galaxy. Vader and his corrupted Jedi, the Inquisitors, hunted the remaining Jedi, working to destroy the Order that Maul once hated. Maul himself became a target for these hunters, but they were never able to find him. Over the years, the Imperial hunters began to call him the Shadow because he was so hard to find. During this time, Maul made a new lightsaber for himself, using parts he took from the weapons of the Inquisitors he defeated in battle. While the Jedi were being hunted, a former Padawan named Farron Barr became interested in Maul. He kept a file on the former Sith Lord inside a droid, hoping to understand how the Jedi had fallen so quickly to the Sith. Eventually, Vader found Barr on the world of Mon Cala. Before he was killed by the Sith Lord, Barr had his droid save the information so that the history of the Sith would not be forgotten. Around this same time, Obi-Wan Kenobi was living in hiding on the desert world of Tatooine to watch over one of Anakin Skywalker's secret children from his marriage with the deceased Senator Padme Amidala. A farmer named Owen Lars told Kenobi to stay away from his nephew Luke Skywalker because he believed Kenobi was a dangerous man who always found trouble. Kenobi agreed with the farmer, but he also thought about how he had survived many dangerous enemies like Count Dooku, General Grievous, and Maul. After he escaped the early days of the Purge, Maul returned to his home world of Dathomir. He lived among the ruins and used the old relics and potions of the Night Sisters to make himself stronger. He wanted revenge more than anything else, so he became the secret leader of a criminal group called Crimson Dawn. He used a man named Dryden Voss to lead the group in public while he stayed in the shadows. Maul also controlled the 5 biggest crime syndicates and kept them from fighting each other. Some of the criminals did not like how Maul treated them, but they stayed quiet because they were making a lot of money under his leadership. One man named Delorium tried to start his own group because he was tired of Maul, but he was not successful. To hide his identity while he traveled, Maul wore a hooded cloak and used a lightsaber that looked like a wooden walking staff. During this time, a woman named Kira met Maul for the first time, and this meeting changed her life forever. In the year 10 BBY, Dryden Voss was killed, and Kira became the new public leader of Crimson Dawn. She contacted Maul on Dathomir and told him that Voss had been killed by a man named Tobias Beckett. Maul was not happy to hear this, telling Kira to come to Dathomir so they could plan their next move. He told her that they would be working much more closely from then on. Maul began to teach Kira about the Sith and the Rule of Two. He told her that the Emperor was actually a Sith Lord named Darth Sidious and that Vader was his apprentice. Maul trained Kira to fight and prepared her to help him destroy the Sith. He wanted to use the power of Crimson Dawn to take down the Empire. He also looked for an ancient weapon called the Fermata Cage, which was a dark side tool that could freeze time and trap people inside. Maul hoped to find an old Sith Lord trapped in the cage and release them so they would attack Sidious and Vader. He thought this would be a good way to use the Rule of Two against his enemies. However, Maul was never able to make the weapon work the way he wanted. Even though he failed to find the ancient Sith, he continued to use Kira and his criminal empire to work against the men who had taken everything from him. Chapter 15: Internal Strife. The years of the Galactic Empire were a time of deep obsession for Maul, as he remained consumed by a desire to destroy Darth Sidious and obtain his long-awaited revenge against the Sith Order that betrayed him. Knowing that he could not underestimate his enemies, he traveled to many worlds in search of an advantage that would help him in his mission. This quest for power eventually led him to the outer rim planet of Demonos, which was a world covered in gray ash and home to an ancient Sith castle. Upon entering the Dark Fortress, Maul encountered a vision of his fallen brother Savage Opress, who mocked him by claiming they were no longer kin. The Spectre attacked, forcing Maul to defend himself against a rage that mirrored his own. During the duel, the Vision accused Maul of seeking power only to mask his own feelings of helplessness. Maul eventually realized the figure was a mere shadow, and he ended the fight by driving his blade through the belly of the imposter. As the body fell to the ground, it transformed into a vision of Maul's own corpse, which whispered in the voice of Oppressed that he had failed his brother. This sight filled him with a bitter anger, and he pushed forward in the deeper parts of the castle to find the source of the dark energy he felt. Deep within the throne room of the castle, Maul felt the presence of another enemy from his past. General Grievous emerged from the shadows, leaping from the ceiling with 4 lightsabers ignited to strike at the former Sith Lord. The mechanical monster taunted Maul about the death of Mother Talzin on Dathomir, reminding him that it was the droid general who had taken the life of his mother. Grievous also mocked the fact that Kenobi was the one who eventually killed the general, effectively stealing the revenge that Maul believed belonged to him. Although Maul felt a sharp pain from these memories, he focused on his hatred and began to dismember the cyborg vision. Grievous laughed even as he lost his limbs, asking if Maul truly felt any comfort knowing that the murderer of his mother was dead. When Maul found himself unable to answer, the vision told him that he was refusing to leave his old life behind. Maul eventually struck down the apparition, but he found no peace in the victory, as the darkness of the castle only made his internal wounds feel more prominent. The final chamber of the temple held a different kind of trial, as Maul passed through a simple door and found himself standing before a vision of the Jedi Master he had killed many years ago, Qui-Gon Jinn. Unlike the others, Jinn did not draw a weapon or offer a challenge to a duel. Instead, the Jedi offered Maul a chance to walk away from his path of hatred and find a way to be free from the prison of his past. Jinn asked what would remain for Maul once his enemies were finally dead, suggesting that the former Sith was actually motivated by his internal pain rather than true rage. This suggestion offended Maul, who believed the Jedi was merely trying to manipulate him or taunt him into a state of weakness. Refusing to listen to the wisdom of the Spectre, Maul lashed out with his lightsaber, causing the vision of Jinn to vanish into the air. With the disappearance of the Jedi, the dark power that had drawn Maul to the castle also faded away, leaving him alone in the silence. Maul returned to his ship feeling empty and hollow, yet he chose to continue his hunt for dark secrets across the galaxy, as he was still unable to let go of the vengeance that defined his existence. Chapter 16: Maul and Ezra Bridger. It was late into the reign of the Galactic Empire, and Maul wandered the galaxy in search of a way to destroy his old master. His journey eventually led him to the world of Malachor, where an ancient Sith temple held a holocron of power. But Maul found himself unable to unlock the secrets of the temple, and his ship was soon destroyed, leaving him stranded on the surface for many years. It was around the year 3 BBY that a young Jedi apprentice named Ezra Bridger arrived on the planet with his companions. Maul encountered the boy and chose to hide his true identity, calling himself the Old Master while acting like a weak man. He told Ezra that he had also crashed on the world and that he wanted to find the holocron to defeat the Sith who had taken everything from him. Through these lies, Maul began to manipulate the boy, sensing that Ezra had a connection to the Force that could be used. The boy felt a sense of pity for the old man, unaware that he was being led into a trap by a master of deception. Nonetheless, the two of them worked together to enter the temple, and Maul guided Ezra through various physical traits that required the use of the dark side. He encouraged the boy to use his anger and his feelings of loss to overcome the obstacles, slowly pulling him away from the teachings of the Jedi. They eventually recovered a special key that granted them access to the temple, where they met up with the teachers of Ezra, Kanan Jarrus, and Ahsoka Tano. These rebels were already engaged in a battle with 3 Imperial Inquisitors hunting the Jedi down. While the Jedi did not trust the stranger, as Ahsoka herself had a complicated past with the former Sith, they agreed to work with Maul to drive the Inquisitors away. Not long after, Maul warned them that the Dark Lord Darth Vader would surely arrive soon, and he insisted that they must all fight together if they hoped to survive the coming battle. As such, Maul continued to speak to the young apprentice as they climbed the temple, telling him that the Jedi was way too weak to defeat their enemies. They encountered the 7th sister, and Maul quickly subdued her using a Force choke. He commanded Ezra to strike her down to prove his resolve, but the boy hesitated because of his Jedi training. Disappointed by this mercy, Maul threw his own lightsaber and killed the woman himself, warning Ezra that his hesitation would one day lead to the death of his friends. They eventually reunited with the others and engaged the remaining Inquisitors in a final duel. Maul and Ahsoka fought together, managing to kill the 5th brother. Meanwhile, the eighth brother attempted to fly away using his lightsaber, but the weapon failed as he fell to his death in the depths below. With the Inquisitors dead, Maul finally revealed his true intentions and turned on the Jedi who had helped him. He struck at Kanan Jarrus and blinded him with a strike of his blade, hoping to remove the man as a threat once and for all, as he believed Jarrus was the only one keeping Ezra away from the dark side. Maul then declared that the temple was actually a weapon that he intended to use for his own purposes, before claiming that Ezra would become his new apprentice. Ahsoka went to find Ezra while the blinded Kanan stood his ground against the Night Brother. Maul laughed at the Jedi, believing the fight would be over in a single moment. But Kanan used the Force to sense his surroundings, managing to catch Maul by surprise to throw him off the edge of the temple. Maul fell into the darkness below, but he managed to survive the drop and stole an Inquisitor's ship to escape the planet. Although he failed to claim the weapon, Maul left Malachor knowing that he had influenced the young Ezra Bridger. Chapter 17. Reignited Vengeance. The year was 2 BBY. The shadows of the past returned to haunt the growing rebellion as Maul resurfaced and found his way onto a Hammerhead corvette, where he interrogated a rebel to find the location of the freighter known as the Ghost. This ship belonged to Hera Syndulla and her crew, which included the young apprentice, Ezra Bridger. Maul moved quickly to seize the vessel and take the crew hostage while the Jedi were away. When Kanan and Ezra discovered the attack, they contacted Hera only to find that Maul held their friend in his grasp. The former Sith demanded a trade, insisting that the Jedi bring him both the Sith and Jedi holocrons in exchange for the lives of their companions. While the Jedi went to retrieve the Sith holocron, Maul remained on the Ghost with his captives. He forced Hera to give him a tour of the ship, all while mocking the dull living quarters of the Jedi. When Hera refused to reveal the location of the Jedi holocron, Maul used the Force to invade her mind. He learned that Ezra had stolen the device once before, and he found it hidden in a compartment beneath the bed of Kanan Jarrus. During this time, the crew attempted to escape by using magnets to trap Maul by his mechanical legs. Their plan briefly succeeded, but Maul used the Force to disable the controls. He threatened to kill them all, proving that his patience was thin and his power was still great. Maul eventually brought the Ghost to a Mandalorian asteroid outpost for the exchange. When the Jedi arrived, Maul separated the Master from the apprentice. He sent Ezra with his droids to a command center, and he led Kanan toward an airlock. Seeking to eliminate the older Jedi once and for all, Maul pushed Kanan into the vacuum of space and closed the door. He believed that Kanan was dead before proceeding to meet Ezra to begin their ritual. The droids stood guard over the prisoners as the Master and apprentice began their work. Maul sat across from the boy on the floor, and they prepared to merge the two ancient devices of power. The holocrons began to glow as they merged together and created a blinding light that filled the room. Ezra sought the key to destroying the Sith, all while seeing visions of distant stars and familiar worlds. Maul searched for his own answers, hoping to find a path to his ultimate goal of destroying the Sith. However, Kanan had survived the cold of space and returned to rescue his friends and his apprentice. He arrived at the command center just as the energy became unstable. Ezra saw visions of twin suns, and Maul realized that his old enemy was still alive. The holocrons exploded, and this gave Maul a chance to flee to his ship. He left the outpost while shouting, "He lives! He lives!" as he escaped. Chapter 18. Hunting Kenobi Down. The ritual involving the holocrons may not have revealed to Maul how to destroy the Sith, but it did reveal to him something he wanted more than anything: vengeance on Obi-Wan Kenobi. Throughout his life following the events on Naboo decades ago, Maul was driven solely by his quest for revenge against the man who nearly killed him. He failed to destroy Kenobi multiple times during the Clone Wars. Then, when Order 66 happened, Maul had believed his rival perished along with the other Jedi. He did not know whether or not Kenobi was still alive until that fateful moment with Ezra Bridger. Maul now had a renewed purpose: to finally end his rivalry with Obi-Wan Kenobi once and for all. As for Ezra, the ritual involving the two holocrons created a mental link between him and Maul. This connection allowed them to gain information that they both desperately wanted. Maul used his bond to find the secret rebel location on the planet Talon, and he began to torment the young Jedi by causing him to see and hear terrifying visions. On one occasion, the boy even attacked a rebel trooper because he mistook the man for the Darksider. Later, Maul approached Ezra and Kanan Jarrus while they were speaking to a Force wielder named Bendu in the wilderness. Bendu warned them not to turn around, but the two Jedi did so and saw Maul watching them from the top of a sand dune. Maul claimed he came in peace to speak with his apprentice, and he explained that the sudden end of their ritual left their visions in fragments. He told them he needed Ezra to come with him to retrieve the rest of the information, all while threatening to activate a beacon that would bring the Empire to the planet if he died. Kanan reluctantly agreed to the demand, so Ezra departed with Maul on a ship called the Night Brother to travel to the world of Dathomir. Unknown to the pair, Kanan and Sabine Wren placed a tracker on the boy and followed them to the ruins of the Night Sister lair. Maul led Ezra into a cave filled with relics from his past, including a portrait of Duchess Satine and the ancient weapon known as the Darksaber. He explained that the only way to get the answers they wanted was to merge their minds again through a ritual. They drank from glasses of magic water that turned their eyes green and caused bright rays to shoot from their faces. Through this magic, they discovered that the Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi was alive and hiding on a planet with twin suns. They also learned that Kenobi held the key to destroying the Sith for good. This news gave Maul a new sense of purpose, as he now had the opportunity to kill two birds with one stone: the death of Kenobi and the destruction of the Sith. But the ritual also had a dangerous side effect that they did not expect. The magic awakened the spirits of the dead Night Sisters, and these ghosts demanded that the two men sacrifice their flesh and blood in exchange for the knowledge they received. Kanan and Sabine entered the cave and tried to shoot the spirits, but the ghosts were too strong and possessed the bodies of the two rebels. The possessed Kanan and Sabine attacked their friends, forcing Maul and Ezra to defend themselves without hurting their companions. Maul fought Kanan while Ezra dodged the attacks from Sabine, and they eventually realized the spirits were bound to the altar inside the cave. They managed to reach the entrance where the ghosts could not follow because their power was limited to the lair. Maul offered Ezra a place by his side again, and he claimed their destinies were tied to the desert world with the twin suns. Ezra refused to leave his friends, frustrating the former Sith with this display of loyalty and compassion. Maul told the boy he was a disappointment, and then he left the planet to search for his old enemy. Chapter 19: Final Confrontation with an Old Rival. Maul eventually made his way to the surface of Tatooine as he used the knowledge from the two holocrons to find his old enemy, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He searched the desert for many days, and he soon realized that he was lost in the vast wastes. He was tired and thirsty, and he thought he might die in the sand under the heat of the twin suns. He fell down and shouted the name of Kenobi with all his strength, and his voice went out across the empty world. But his will was strong, and he found a reason to keep moving forward. He knew he could not find Kenobi alone, and so he planned to trick the boy he called his apprentice. He used the Sith holocron to send a vision to Ezra Bridger, hoping the boy would lead him to the hidden Jedi. Ezra saw the vision and was immediately alarmed as he believed Kenobi was in danger. He then traveled to the planet to stop Maul from killing the old Jedi Master. He also wanted to ask the Master to join the rebellion before he landed his ship in a canyon at night. Ezra then found the holocron part that Maul used as a bait, eventually realizing it was a trap as a group of Tusken Raiders appeared. The Raiders attacked Ezra and his droid, destroying his ship in the fight. Ezra was knocked out by the blast, but Maul came out of the shadows to kill the Raiders with his red blade. He then left Ezra alone in the sand without saying a word as he waited for the boy to move. Ezra and Chopper woke up and looked for a way to leave the canyon. They were not sure if they should stay in the hills or walk into the open desert. Maul appeared to Ezra as a vision, telling the boy to walk into the sands to find his destiny. Ezra followed the advice, but the heat was too strong for him and the droid. They both fell over in a sandstorm, almost dying in the dirt. But Obi-Wan Kenobi arrived on a dewback and found them in the storm. He took them to his camp and started a small fire. He then gave the droid power and fixed the wounds of the boy. When Ezra woke up, Kenobi told him that Maul had used him to find the way to his home. Maul arrived at the camp then, and he was ready to finish their old fight at last. Ezra wanted to help, but the Master told the boy to go back to his friends and stay away. Ezra and Chopper left, and Maul said goodbye to the boy before facing Kenobi. Maul looked at the simple camp, and he laughed at how poor Kenobi was living in the dirt. He told Kenobi that he was living like a rat, wondering if being dead would be better than this lonely life. Kenobi was calm, and he told Maul that he was the one who had nothing because he only lived for hate and power. Kenobi's words angered Maul, for they were the harsh truths the former Sith could never accept. Throughout his life, Maul lived for nothing except hatred and the quest for more power. He had held on to his hatred most of his life, wanting to use it against the Jedi and the people who wronged him. But even though Maul survived for decades by holding on to this desire for revenge, he could never accept that this was a meaningless life. He could have chosen to live different many times after his mother restored his sanity many years ago. But instead of doing so, he held on to his rage in the hopes of finding meaning. Unbeknownst to Maul, his anger only led to a meaningless existence. But right then and there, he only had eyes for Kenobi, wanting to see the old master's death once and for all. He used his lightsaber to throw sand on the fire and put it out. He thought about why Kenobi would stay in the desert for so many years, and he knew it was not just to hide from the Empire. Eventually, Maul realized that Kenobi was protecting someone, and he saw a boy in the mind of the Jedi. He saw Luke Skywalker, whom he believed was someone so important that Obi-Wan had to live the rest of his entire life on a desert to protect. Realizing Luke could be in danger as he believed the boy to be the only hope the galaxy had left, Kenobi was forced to stand up and ignite his lightsaber. He immediately took a defensive stance to protect the secret. Maul turned on both ends of his red blade, and the two men looked at each other in the dark. Kenobi changed his stance to look like his old master, and Maul thought he could win by using the same move he used to kill Qui-Gon Jinn long ago on Naboo. Maul ran forward, and the two fighters hit their blades together in the night. Maul tried to hit Kenobi in the face with the handle of his weapon, but Kenobi was faster this time. Obi-Wan parried every single one of Maul's attacks before predicting the next move, the same lightsaber hilt attack that stunned Qui-Gon decades ago. As a master of the defensive form of Seresu, Obi-Wan had perfected a counter for this move. Before Maul could hit him with the lightsaber handle, Kenobi moved his blade down and cut through Maul's weapon and his chest. Maul stopped and looked at the wound as he fell into his rival's arms with his life fading away. He was dying, and he asked if the boy was the chosen one. Kenobi said that he was, and Maul felt a sense of peace. He said that the boy would avenge them both against the Sith before dying in the arms of his enemy. In what was a final act of mercy, Kenobi closed the eyes of his old rival and laid him to rest in the sand. Refusing to let go of his hatred his entire life, Maul finally let his emotions go at the end of his life as he realized far too late that he had been holding on to the wrong things. Ironically, he died in the merciful arms of the man whom he swore he hated the most, only for Obi-Wan to show sadness and mercy toward his tragic rival at the end of the Dathomirian Zabrak's life. Was it all worth it for Maul to have spent his entire life fueled by hatred and vengeance? Even he would say at the end of it all that he could have lived his life differently had he been given another chance. But such was the fate of a tragic figure whose mind and emotions had been twisted by darkness early on. And in the end, all he saw was darkness, as he peacefully let go of the negativity that kept him alive for so long. The Sith's power remained strong long after Emperor Palpatine's reign of terror and Darth Vader's redemption. One of those whose darkness allowed the Sith to thrive was Darth Talon, a powerful Sith lady who stood alongside Darth Krayt in the One Sith. Her loyalty to her lord had no limits, and it was through her mastery of the art of seduction that she truly became one of the most dangerous agents of darkness throughout her time. Yet, for all the chaos she caused, not many fans know her and her story, rather just about her appealing design. So let's hear her story. Chapter 1. Training and Early Beginning. More than a century after the fall of the Empire, the Sith were still actively in conflict with the Jedi Order. But this was no longer the old Sith Order where the rule of two reigned supreme. This was a new Sith Order called the One Sith. And much like the ancient Sith Empire thousands of years ago, the One Sith trained their initiates from the ground up. Talon was one of them. She was a Lethan female Twi'lek who was born with an extremely rare red skin color. Having shown early gifts in the Force, she was practically bred and raised in Korriban, the ancient burial world that had become the secret heart of the revived Sith Order. But among the thousands of Sith hopefuls serving for the sole Emperor of the One Sith, she easily stood not just because of her looks, but also because of her innate talents. They already knew she was going to be beautiful, but her power was one that was forged under the tutelage of Darth Ruin, a powerful Sith Lord in his own right. Little was known about Talon's life before she became Ruin's apprentice, yet it was through his teachings that she honed her connection with the dark side until she became a living weapon whose mind was trained solely to bend the tenets of the One Sith and their master Darth Krayt. This master was unlike the Emperor who orchestrated the destruction of the Jedi Order. Krayt, who used to be a Jedi named Asherad Het, was ancient himself, having lived before the time of the Clone Wars and during the rise of Palpatine's Empire. He even fought alongside Anakin Skywalker during certain skirmishes. However, after barely surviving Order 66, Krayt wandered around the galaxy until he was captured by the Yuuzhan Vong, a terrifying race of conquerors who eventually became a threat to the New Republic. The Vong experimented on him, giving him long life at the cost of constant pain. Such pain and suffering strengthened his hatred and trust in the dark side, allowing him to fuel his powers far beyond the limits of any Jedi or Sith. So, he rejected the ways of the Jedi and turned his back on Darth Bane's rule of two. On Korriban, he found Zoshan's Sith holocron, which he used to hone his knowledge in the dark side. He didn't have a true master. After all, there were no Sith Lords left to teach him. Despite that, he proclaimed himself a Sith Lord after mastering the dark side from the holocron. Krayt's experiences with the Republic, the Clone Wars, the Empire, and the Yuuzhan Vong made him realize one thing, that the galaxy needed one singular will to make it strong again. In effect, he instituted the Rule of One. This didn't mean there should only be one Sith Lord. In fact, Krayt's rule allowed the existence of countless Sith Lords, but all of them were inferior to one Sith Master, Krayt himself. As Luke Skywalker reformed the new Jedi Order during the time of the New Republic, believing the Sith was now extinct, Krayt mustered his forces on the ancient world of Korriban, which used to be the Sith Empire's seat of power. But while Krayt founded this new Sith Order 27 years after the Battle of Yavin, it remained dormant for decades. It did not even interfere with Darth Caedus' Sith Order during its war with Luke's Jedi Order. Instead, Krayt kept everything a secret even after Caedus' demise. The death of the last Sith Lord from Darth Bane's line effectively left Krayt's One Sith as the only group claiming itself to be the true Sith Order. And decades after Caedus' death, Krayt and his One Sith kept a low profile, quietly observing the galaxy until it was the right time to strike. So, by the time Talon was training to become part of Darth Krayt's One Sith, she was fully immersed in their new Order's vision, honing her fierce loyalty to the Sith. But Ruin's training, which were brutal by Sith standards, were what truly forged her skills early. While other apprentices and initiates died under Ruin's tutelage, Talon survived and showed promise. It was through those harsh conditions that she mastered advanced lightsaber techniques that combined Taru and Makashi into a unique form that made use of her acrobatic talents and grace. But beyond the dark side teachings and the lightsaber mastery, one other important skill she learned was the art of assassination. Talon was a rare beauty even among the Twi'lek, making her a natural seductress. So as a would-be assassin, she learned stealth techniques and how to read her enemy's weaknesses. But it was when Darth Krayt himself carved the tattoos on her skin that Talon truly transformed. The process itself was painful, which allowed her to strengthen the pain-fueled dark side within her. And there was one test left for her to showcase her absolute loyalty to the One Sith. It was to kill her own master. Chapter 2. Talon's Rise. As Talon was still trying to grasp Darth Krayt's ultimate test for her, the rest of the galaxy was not aware of what was happening on Korriban. At that time, the New Republic formed shortly after the Rebellion's success had been replaced by the Galactic Alliance. This new order was facing the similar problems that led to the downfall of the Republic replaced by Palpatine's Empire. There were internal problems and infighting among the members of the Alliance, particularly because of the Yuuzhan Vong. While the war with the Vong had already ended a long time ago, there were still worlds harboring hatred for them because of the devastation they left behind. There was also the Fel Empire, the successor to Palpatine's Galactic Empire but was aligned with the Light. The Fel Empire became the dominant power in the galaxy, effectively replacing the Galactic Alliance, whose power had weakened. Meanwhile, the Jedi Order had separated itself from the rest of the galaxy and even the Fel Empire. The Empire, ruled by Emperor Roan Fel, relied on his own Imperial Knights, a group of Force users aligned with the light side. Meanwhile, the Jedi Order remained an independent group that served as peacekeepers with hundreds of Jedi at its command. However, none of those Jedi knew that there was a darkness rising far from the reaches of the galaxy. Over at Korriban, Talon understood that the order to kill her master was a test of loyalty. If she could kill the man who practically raised her to be the weapon she became, she would be willing to do anything for Darth Krayt. So she complied, knowing that certain death would come if she were to show anything other than pure loyalty to the One Sith's vision. Talon found Ruin meditating in his chambers, but as the younger Twi'lek approached her master, Ruin smiled because he knew this day would come. He did not resist upon sensing Talon's desire to execute him, so with one swift strike, Talon decapitated her master, showing a coldness befitting of a true Sith. She presented Ruin's head to Krayt, who was impressed by how efficient she was. The Twi'lek girl showed a rare kind of killing efficiency that separated her from other Sith initiates who often kill sloppily out of pure anger. So, as a reward, Krayt ultimately gave her the name Darth Talon to represent her similarity to the claws of a predator. Deadly, efficient, and strikes without warning. But Darth Talon was not going to simply become one of the many Sith lords and ladies who serve Krayt in the lower parts of the Sith's leadership ladder. In no time at all, the Emperor elevated her to the status of a Hand. While Krayt's rule of one meant that all power to rule over the Sith was reserved solely for him, he could not handle all that power by himself. As such, he consolidated his powers to some of his most trusted Sith warriors, given ranks and duties that corresponded to Krayt's body parts. As a Hand, Talon was to be one of two enforcers ready to attack, kill, and devastate at their master's order. Talon's partner was an equally deadly Sith Lord named Darth Nihil, a pale Nagai warrior who had a natural affinity for combat. This partnership represented the two ways the Sith preferred to operate. Nihil was known for using overwhelming force in combat, often preferring brutality and straight-up power against his enemies. On the other hand, Talon was a smooth and deadly operator, preferring to use stealth and pinpoint precision rather than sheer strength and power. They perfectly complemented each other as they were set to spread fear across the galaxy in Darth Krayt's name. Chapter 3: Return of the Sith. Darth Talon's rise to power coincided with Darth Krayt's ultimate plans for the One Sith. After decades of observing the struggles of the Galactic Alliance and the Fel Empire, it was time for the Sith to strike. He targeted the Ossus Project. This project was supposed to be a peaceful partnership involving the Jedi, the Alliance, and the Yuuzhan Vong. It was meant to terraform the barren worlds left devastated by the war with the Vong. However, Krayt had secretly installed his own agents within the Alliance. Chief among them was Darth Maladi. The project was successful in restoring Ossus, but the other planets that had been selected to take part in the project were left worse than before. Instead of restoring these planets, the project left the citizens in pain, as the project failed due to the sabotage. It was all part of the One Sith's plans to divert the galaxy's anger toward the Vong, while weakening their trust in the Alliance. The sabotage gave the Fel Empire and its Moff Council a reason to declare war on the Alliance, prompting another war between powerful factions controlling the majority of the galaxy. The Jedi prompted the Alliance to aid them against the Fel Empire because they defended the Vong, and the truth above everything else. But the Alliance was never truly united in the cause, weakening their strength. Meanwhile, Emperor Fel refused to send his Imperial Knights to the war, so with no Force users ready to help the Empire, the One Sith joined the fray, not as direct fighters, but as secret agents and informants, feeding information to both sides to manipulate the war in their favor. In 3 years, the Alliance fell to the Empire, surrendering after realizing it could no longer win the war. Emperor Fel, meanwhile, was ready to proclaim a new galactic power under his rule. But just as he was about to do so, thousands of hidden Sith warriors emerged out of hiding, showcasing just how deep Krayt's influence had penetrated through the Empire. Most of them had been posing as Imperial officers, or even members of Fel's own trusted circle. Within a few hours, the coordinated strike paralyzed the Fel Empire, allowing the Sith to take over as Emperor Fel barely escaped the chaos. As the One Sith was now back in power, the only thing left to do was to finally destroy the Jedi Order, which refused to surrender itself to the Empire after Coruscant fell. That was when another coordinated strike happened. Krayt sent an attack party led by Darth Nihil to Ossus, where the Jedi Order kept its primary academy. The attack began with an orbital bombardment that shattered the Academy's initial defenses and sent the Jedi panicking. Then came the boarding party led by Nihil, commanding countless Sith Lords and warriors against the Jedi ready to defend their turf. Nihil and his Sith warriors killed Jedi Masters, Knights, and Padawans alike, refusing to leave any survivors. Their biggest score was the death of Cole Skywalker, the leader of the Skywalker bloodline at that time. It was a victory for the One Sith, but not an absolute one, as Cade Skywalker and a few other Jedi escaped. Still, it was a successful mission that rendered the Jedi basically extinct. and with the Jedi gone, Krayt assumed the Imperial throne and forced the Moff Council to recognize him as their ruler. Meanwhile, Darth Talon was biding her time, knowing she would eventually get called upon to serve her master. While Nihil was the unquestioned attacker capable of commanding countless other Sith in an all-out battle, Talon was the designated assassin who could travel to different worlds in secret to hunt down anyone her master believed could pose a problem. For the next 7 years, Talon took down any surviving Jedi or anyone Krayt deemed a threat to the Empire's power. While she didn't have Nihil's military clout after her fellow Hand's success during the massacre of Ossus, Talon's name spread fear across the galaxy. No one wanted to oppose the one Sith, knowing the Crimson Assassin with the black tattoos could be waiting in the shadows to strike at any time. Talon was the monster hiding under the bed for many Jedi or would-be rebels who were afraid that she might come for them sooner or later. Military leaders who spoke ill about the Emperor suddenly went missing. Meanwhile, anyone who entertained the idea of rebelling against the one Sith found themselves at the other end of Talon's red lightsaber. She was the assassin essential to Krayt's plan to stay in power. While Nihil went to battle with armies and other groups ready to oppose Krayt, Talon killed threats before they became cancerous to the New Order. But there was one big problem for Krayt and the one Sith. With Roan Fel still alive after escaping Coruscant during Krayt's attack, the threat of an imminent attack from the deposed Fel Emperor was still very much a possibility. So, with Roan Fel in hiding, planning his next move against the Sith Emperor who removed him from power, it was time for Talon to show why she was chosen as one of her master's hands. Chapter 4. Pursuing the Princess. Darth Krayt could not rule the galaxy supremely, knowing there was still the threat of the former Emperor lurking in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. But his intelligence network, built through decades of planning and scheming, was vast and efficient. So, 7 years after the rise of the Sith Empire, Krayt's spies finally found a lead. They had located Princess Marasiah Fel, daughter of the deposed Roan Fel. She was hiding in the desert world of Socorro, far from an ideal dwelling place for a princess, but was perfect for a royal in hiding. Krayt wanted to capture her alive to use her as bait to force her father to come out of hiding. The only one perfect for the job was Darth Talon herself. Socorro was a smuggler's haven, where nothing spoke louder than credits. However, despite being a hideout for the scum of the galaxy, the planet had an Imperial diplomatic compound reserved for anyone loyal to the Fel but were hiding from the Sith. The princess was one of those people, but she was not going to be an easy target for any Sith, for she was under the protection of Imperial Knight Elk Vedder, a powerful defender trained to combat Force users. Unfortunately for her, Talon was no ordinary Force user, for she had more tricks than any other Sith. So instead of a head-on strike, Talon used the cover of nightfall and the Force to mask her presence, passing through security without any trouble. But there was also a psychological factor that made her mission devastatingly successful. She set fire to the surrounding buildings, creating chaos and destroying her enemy's formation. As civilians were fleeing from all directions, she used the panic to conceal herself. Her tactics made it impossible for the princess's defenders to resist her in an organized way. But Vedder, as powerful as she was, recognized the threat of the Sith, albeit all on her own and without help from the other defenders. She was not an ordinary knight, for she was specifically trained to deal with other lightsaber combatants since childhood, to effectively serve the Fel dynasty. Her armor was the standard Imperial Knight's defensive advantage against lightsabers because it could withstand strikes from even the most skilled Force user. Its Cortosis gauntlets could also shut lightsabers temporarily to create openings for a counterattack. So when Vedder met the princess's would-be captor, she ignited her silver lightsaber, confident that her weapon and armor could pose a challenge to the Sith Lady. Throughout their duel, she fought defensively, using the Force to hone her defenses instead of going all out on the offensive. Vedder held her own for a few minutes, but she had never faced a true dark side master before. Talon's use of the Ataru acrobatic form allowed her to slip by the knight's defenses. Meanwhile, Makashi, which uses pinpoint precision strikes, allowed her to find holes in Vedder's stance, eventually severing the knight's sword hand. Vedder, knowing she had lost, attempted to flee, but Talon displayed Sith cruelty by peppering her with Force lightning, not to kill, but to torture. Throughout the painful punishment, Talon used the dark side to extract information from Vedder's mind. As she extracted all the knowledge she needed from the knight, Talon used a final burst of lightning that effectively killed the defender. However, based on the information she extracted, Talon learned that the princess had escaped the planet with the aid of a smuggling crew operating a freighter Mynock. Unbeknownst to Talon, the crew hired to smuggle the princess included none other than Cade Skywalker, the heir to the Skywalker legacy. At that time, Cade had almost severed his connection to the Force. The trauma of seeing his father killed before his eyes and the pain of losing everyone he loved during the massacre of Ossus changed him. In his attempt to hide his power and to stay away from the affairs of the Sith, he became a smuggler, using death sticks as a coping mechanism for all problems. But the Force had a plan for him, and it drew him back to the conflict between the Jedi and the Sith by putting him right in Darth Talon's path. Not wanting to fail her mission, Talon decided to pursue the princess rather than returning to Coruscant to a disappointed emperor. Her investigation revealed that Cade and his crew fled toward Vendaxa, a fertile jungle world in the expansion region of the galaxy. This time, she was not alone. Talon assembled a small strike team composed of her fellow hand Darth Nihil and a few other Sith warriors. Chapter 5. Encountering Cade Skywalker. Darth Talon knew her target and destination, but while she was determined to follow the princess to Vendaxa, what she didn't know was the fact that there was a Skywalker involved. But because the Mynock was damaged in its escape from Socorro, Cade and the rest of the ship's crew had to make emergency repairs on this forest planet. Talon led the strike force through the planet's thick forest, fighting predators and hostile fauna along the way. But her mastery with beast control allowed her to go through the planet's challenges easily, all while the smugglers struggled with the animals that attacked them. Talon and her forces easily found themselves catching up to their targets, ready to ambush them. To ensure her prey would not escape anymore, she sabotaged the Mynock, and to keep the smugglers preoccupied, she used her powers to send the planet's beasts toward them. The problem, however, was that the princess had two protectors who did not hesitate to come to her aid. The Zabrak Wolf Sazin and the Twi'lek Shadow Val were Jedi who survived the destruction of the Academy on Ossus. While Sazin lost his arm to Nihil during the massacre of Ossus, he managed to escape and hide with Val for 7 years. They did a great job at hiding their presence from the Sith, but the Force had other plans for them when they learned they needed to rescue Princess Marasiah Fel. Talon, on her own, had to face the two Jedi, all while the rest of the princess's crew defended themselves against the beasts she sent their way. The Sith Hand displayed her mastery over combat, holding her own against the Jedi Masters as she switched perfectly from offense to defense. This was not an easy task, as Sazin and Val were already familiar with each other. Val was Sazin's Padawan years ago, and they used their familiarity and chemistry against the Sith Lady. However, Talon had the upper hand. She was about to deliver the finishing blow to Val until the Twi'lek Jedi revealed his lightsaber's second blade, evening the odds once more. Nevertheless, the Sith Lady recalibrated her tactics, adjusting to the surprise, and eventually took Val out of the equation with a powerful kick that sent him flying. It was now a one-on-one fight against the Jedi Master Sazin. Despite fighting with a prosthetic arm, Sazin held his own against the Sith by adopting a defensive stance. He did not mean to defeat Talon, but only tried his best to buy time for the others to escape her wrath. But the one Sith trained Talon to destroy Jedi defenses. Her combination of Ataru and Makashi were deadly enough to find openings in the toughest defensive stances. As she created a slight opening, Talon blasted the Jedi with Force Lightning before Sazin could block it. The Jedi Master was now incapacitated, about to lose his life when he dropped down to his knees. Talon was ready to end the encounter right then and there, until Princess Marasiah herself entered the fight. Armed with a stolen lightsaber and using her Imperial Knight training, her anger propelled her wild strikes. She was still enraged from the death of El-Kavetter, using her emotions to strengthen her attack against the Sith. But Talon had faced tougher and stronger strikes before, especially during her training on Korriban. She deflected the princess's attacks masterfully until Shadow Val returned to the fight. Still, this was not enough to defeat Talon. Then, an unlikely hero emerged to change the course of the fight. Cade Skywalker had previously told Wolf Sazin that he had turned his back on the Jedi and the Force. Sazin recognized him, believing he could help save the galaxy from the Sith, but the secretive Skywalker heir did not want anything to do with him. So, during Talon's attack, he was preoccupied with fighting the other Sith warriors, focusing more on defending himself and his payday. But when he saw Talon blasting Sazin with Force Lightning, the dormant Jedi side within Cade surfaced. It was pure instinct as he reached through the Force and grasped the wreckage of a ship, sending it flying toward the Sith Lady at devastating speed. While Talon sensed the attack, it was too late for her to fully defend herself against the ship hull that weighed several tons. The wreckage broke her attack against the Jedi and buried her, leaving her with broken ribs. But she survived, easily recovering on her own. Talon used her own power to free herself from the wreckage, but by the time she had regained her composure, the princess and her protectors had already fled, surviving the wrath of the Sith. Still, Talon and her Sith allies gave chase. Not too long after, Imperial Knights Antares Draco and Ganner Krieg arrived on Vindaxa in an unauthorized attempt to rescue their princes. The fighting with the Sith resumed, with Talon and Nihil holding their own against the combined forces of the bounty hunters, Jedi, and Imperial Knights. But Cade intervened once more, using the Mynock as their last resort to flee from their enemies. The ship was already airborne until Talon used Force Jump to attempt to board the Mynock and continue the fight there. However, Draco was ready for her. He used a massive Force push that sent the Sith flying back to the ground. This was more than enough for the princess and her rescuers to escape into hyperspace to live another day. Meanwhile, Talon was left grounded on the planet, knowing she had failed her mission. She was prepared for the consequences, understanding that Darth Krayt was never a forgiving master. Chapter 6. Capturing Skywalker. In truth, Darth Talon returned to Coruscant ready not only for punishment, but certain death. She knew she was going to get executed for her shortcoming, as death was the only punishment befitting of a failure. After all, other Sith had been executed for lesser crimes and mistakes. She delivered her report to the Emperor, including the details of her investigation regarding the smuggler who was incredibly powerful in the Force. On Vindaxa, she had no idea who this mysterious Force user was, but her spies had told her that this man was Cade Skywalker. So, as she told her master the facts behind their failure and her investigations, Talon realized she had escaped certain death. The detail about Cade Skywalker, the very reason the princess escaped Talon, intrigued Krayt, tickling the Sith Lord's interests. Having seen the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker, the reign of terror of Darth Vader, and the emergence of Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order, Krayt was obsessed with the Skywalker bloodline. Though he was powerful himself, Krayt knew that the Skywalker bloodline always produced beings with immense potential in the Force. Though Cole Skywalker did indeed fall during the massacre of Ossus, Krayt understood that a Skywalker trained properly in the ways of the Force was always going to be more formidable than any other being. But a Skywalker honed in the dark side would be an entirely different type of power, one that had the potential to become a weapon when used right. On one hand, Krayt knew that Cade, when trained in the ways of the dark side, could potentially depose him from his throne. But on the other hand, he also knew that pulling the last surviving Skywalker to the Sith would destroy all hope among the Jedi and those who still resisted the Sith. It was a gamble the Dark Lord was willing to take. More importantly, he also believed that a Skywalker who had fully unlocked the ways of the dark side could be his salvation. While Krayt had been given a longer lifespan by the experiments conducted on him by the Yuuzhan Vong decades ago, his condition had begun to deteriorate as the Vong implants were slowly killing him. He was not immortal, after all, and all Sith Lords wished to be immortal so that they could rule the galaxy forever. So if he could unlock Cade's full potential, he could very well extend his own lifespan or even grant himself immortality. Securing Skywalker had now become more important than chasing Princess Fel. Cade had become the One Sith's new priority. Thus, Talon's orders changed. She now had to focus all her resources on capturing Cade Skywalker alive and undamaged in the hopes of giving him to Krayt, who would turn him over to the dark side. This young Skywalker was to be the Sith's ultimate weapon as far as the Dark Lord was concerned. The Sith Empire poured all its efforts into tracking Cade Skywalker. The Fel dynasty immediately turned into an afterthought as the Sith's intelligence network turned every stone to track Cade's movements. But 7 years of running away from his destiny allowed Skywalker to master the art of keeping a low profile. He remained elusive, using his skills as a smuggler to stay one step ahead of his pursuers. But the Sith eventually understood that the best way to capture a Skywalker was not to chase him. Since Anakin, Skywalkers were both blessed and cursed by compassion and attachment. Their innate will to protect their allies and friends have been both a strength and a weakness to this family. Anakin fell to the dark side because of his love for Padme Amidala. Meanwhile, Luke almost lost his life when Vader used his friends to set a trap for him. In other words, history had taught the Sith a lesson on how to best capture a Skywalker. To that end, they used the Bothan Jedi Hosk Trailis, a survivor of Ossus. This Jedi was no ordinary Force user. He was known for his healing powers and for tending to refugees from the war. However, he had been previously given up to the Sith by none other than Cade Skywalker and his band of bounty hunters before the former Jedi decided to try to rekindle his connection with the Force. The Sith tortured Trailis, with Darth Maul leading the endeavor. He could no longer endure the pain and eventually told the Sith everything he knew about Cade, including his Force abilities. Meanwhile, Cade was on Ossus to try to complete his training. The young Skywalker had a vision of Luke during one of his meditations. The legendary Skywalker told him what the Sith was doing to Hosk and that it was Cade's duty to make things right, because he was the one responsible for giving Trailis to the one Sith. Meanwhile, over at Coruscant, Crate and the other Sith understood that a true Jedi like Cade would have enough compassion to override his need to survive. True enough, Cade left Ossus despite not having completed his training so that he could travel to Coruscant to rescue the captured Jedi. Meanwhile, Darth Talon was there to spring the trap set for the runaway Skywalker. Cade managed to slip past security seemingly too easily, as he made his way to Hosk's location as a smuggler who delivered captured Jedi. But it was a bit too easy for him, as the Sith's goal was not to resist his rescue attempt, but to get to him. Talon was the perfect Sith for the job, not only because she had the strength to fight Cade, but also because she had a natural talent for seduction. So as Skywalker made his way to the Jedi, Talon positioned herself close by, using the dark side to conceal herself. She was biding her time, waiting for the right moment to strike. More importantly, she had done her homework. Talon used the recordings of their fight on Vendaxa to study Cade's fighting style, noticing that he had a unique blend of Jedi training and street brawling techniques. The Sith were trained to fight and counter Jedi fighting styles, but not crude techniques that were unpredictable and unconventional. But doing her homework allowed her to be ready for his abilities and raw power. Talon shadowed Skywalker as he made his way through the corridors. He made his way to Hosk and freed the captured Jedi, but the Sith Lady revealed herself, blocking the Jedi's escape route. The only way out was through Talon. But while the powerful hand quickly incapacitated Hosk, she struggled against Cade despite preparing herself for his fighting style. Skywalker was unlike any other Jedi she had faced. Talon had more than held her own against powerful Jedi Masters. Sometimes she even had to take on multiple Jedi without a problem. But Cade approached her with a controlled fury that mixed his lightsaber techniques with classic stances and improvised tactics. Most Jedi fought with restraint, unwilling to allow their rage to take over. So in most cases, their fighting style was unpredictable, making it easy for the Sith to counter their more controlled way of fighting. But Cade had abandoned such restraint because he learned how to channel his emotions without necessarily falling to the dark side. His style was unpredictable, forcing Talon to go on the defensive several times. But the Jedi was relentless in his attack until he suddenly bordered the dark side. His eyes were showing signs of corruption, the very same thing that happened to Anakin Skywalker more than 100 years ago. And with a single blast of Force push, he incapacitated a wounded Talon. Just before the Sith Lady could recover, Cade's hand was already wrapped around her throat, ready to deliver a killing strike. But Talon had backup. Darth Maul had been observing the fight from afar. Not wanting his fellow hand to die at the hands of a Jedi, he intervened by using the Force to choke Skywalker. Cade had been defeated, but it took the strength of two hands to beat him. But Talon also saw this as a defeat, for she was angry at Maul for intervening, knowing completely well they could not have subdued Skywalker without her fellow hand's help. But her pride was secondary only to the goal of corrupting the last heir to the Skywalker legacy. They had successfully captured their primary target, ready to turn him into their ultimate weapon. Chapter 7: Training Cade. While Darth Talon resented the fact that she could not defeat Cade Skywalker without Darth Maul's assistance, she quickly understood just how important their captured prey was. During their fight, she noticed how Cade used a crude and raw fighting style that did not entirely channel the dark side, but was still more than enough to counter whatever she threw at him. To that end, she understood the importance of turning him to the dark side, a mission that began with Darth Krayt himself. The Sith brought Skywalker to Krayt, who was quick to praise the hands for their success, but Talon noticed that her master was more pleased with Maul's timely intervention, slowly believing that Krayt favored her fellow hand more. Torture followed soon after as the Sith tried to break Cade. They used recordings of Cole's last moments to bring the young Skywalker's rage out. Meanwhile, Darth Malady brutally tortured him, only to realize they could not easily break this young man. Years of struggle had turned Cade into a hardened warrior capable of withstanding any pain and psychological warfare. They could not convert him the traditional way. Then, soon after, the Sith presented Cade to their master as it was clear they needed to change their tactics. Crate revealed his identity as a former Jedi from the era of the Clone Wars. He recounted the circumstances that led to his fall and how he became what he was. However, his story failed to move Cade as the Skywalker heir even mocked the one Sith Emperor. An angry Crate pushed Cade against the wall, only for the Jedi to reveal his unique skill, the ability to reverse healing. He used his powers to open the wounds that Talon suffered in their fight, nearly killing the Sith Lady in the process. But Crate forced him to undo what he had done in a way only a Sith Lord knows. The Dark Emperor used Cade's friends, infecting them with the same coral seeds the Vong implanted in him decades ago. Delia Blue and Jariah Sin, Cade's smuggler friends, were dying from excruciating pain. The ordeal forced Skywalker to use his powers to heal them because his ability was the only way to counter those seeds. He also healed Talon using the same powers out of fear that the Dark Lord might further harm his friends. As soon as he saw what Cade was capable of, the Dark Lord wasted no time in telling him his plans for him, to lure him to the dark side. Skywalker promised to pledge his services to him if the Sith would free his friends. As such, he became a slave to the enemies the Jedi swore to defeat. Meanwhile, Talon, once again, became instrumental in this mission as she was given the task of training Skywalker in the ways of the Sith. She became the master to the apprentice who nearly killed her not once, not twice, but thrice. The mission to turn Cade to the dark side goes all the way back to the implants with Crate. While Skywalker's healing abilities were already powerful enough to counter the implants at their early stages, Crate's implants had done so much damage to his body that Cade could not do anything at his current level. The Dark Lord wanted him to grow even more powerful in the dark side, as every use of his healing abilities pulled him further and further from the light. Crate needed Cade to become powerful enough to repair the damage he had been enduring for decades. But there was one important reason Talon was the Sith chosen to oversee Cade's turn to the dark side. When Skywalker healed her, a force bond formed between them, allowing each other to sense the other's presence and emotions. Believing this bond would be useful in binding Cade to the Sith, he commanded Talon to prioritize Skywalker's corruption above everything else. Cade, meanwhile, submitted to the Sith not because he wanted to turn to the dark side or that he believed in the one Sith's vision for the galaxy. Instead, it was a feint designed to earn the Sith's trust in order to learn more about Crate's greater plans. So, during his apprenticeship under Talon, he was seemingly eager to absorb everything the Sith could teach him, embracing Sith combat and dark side teachings. Interestingly, this twisted master and apprentice relationship almost gave rise to true intimacy between them, as they supposedly spent a night together at least once. Talon's dark seduction and innate beauty made her the perfect for the job, as she could simply charm Skywalker. But such a relationship was complex, as it was more akin to manipulation instead of actual romance. Yet no one was sure who was manipulating who. Talon remained loyal to Crate, believing she was manipulating Skywalker's emotions in the hope of turning him to the dark side. Meanwhile, Cade was seemingly manipulating his master to learn everything he could possibly learn about the Sith in the hopes of using it against them. But when it became clear that Talon's best efforts could not turn Cade to their side, she reported that his conversion was incomplete and that he never truly submitted to the Sith. Then there was one final test to finally prove once and for all whether or not Skywalker had turned to the dark side. Chapter 8. Cade's Choice. Darth Crate still believed that Cade's ultimate destiny was to join them in the one Sith, even though that Talon had already given hope that he would turn. So, to prove whether or not he had the capacity for darkness, Talon arranged for the execution of Hosk Trailis, the very person Cade risked his life to save. But Hosk's executor would have to be Cade. If he would not kill the Jedi, then they would both die. The anticipation was tense. Talon stood by her master's side with an eager look, believing this was the culmination of her seduction. Meanwhile, Niles stood ready, preparing himself for combat in case either Cade or Hosk would try to escape. As for Trailis, he merely looked at Skywalker, accepting his fate, regardless of Skywalker's choice. Meanwhile, Cade understood the weight of the moment. He knew there was no one coming to rescue them. He also could not bear to strike down the man his father once called a very close friend when the Jedi Order was still around. He even thought about killing Hosk quickly to end the Jedi's suffering, believing it would be the best for both of them. But then he understood the bigger picture. Cade, however, understood that the Sith Lord would not kill him because he had learned that his powers were the very reason Krayt wanted him to turn to the dark side. He understood that this enemy would not risk losing the only way he could return to full power and potentially live and rule forever, so Cade refused to execute Hosk. Angry at such rejection, Krayt killed the Jedi himself. The act caused the reaction he wanted from Cade, as Skywalker channeled his inner darkness, about to turn into the very weapon Krayt wanted him to become. "You see," Krayt said, "your hesitation changed nothing. The Jedi is dead, and his suffering was prolonged by your weakness." But just as Cade was about to release his darkness, a familiar face appeared. It was not a last-minute savior ready to turn the tide. Instead, it was the ghost of Cole Skywalker, standing before his son. This was not an ordinary Force ghost because Cole looked exactly as he did when he was alive, even bearing the same wounds he suffered before his death at Ossus. Cade stared at his father with the same look of disbelief that the Sith had on their faces. No one could believe what was happening before them, including Darth Krayt and his hands. Cole did not even need to utter a single word, for his presence alone was all it took to send a clear message, that Cade was a Jedi and a Skywalker. Seeing his father appearing before him just before he was about to turn to the dark was more than enough for Cade to remember who he was. Whatever darkness had built up within the younger Skywalker suddenly disappeared and gave room for the light to grow. Knowing what he needed to do, Cade reached out with his hand from across the room. He knew that Krayt had kept his father's lightsaber as a trophy, so with clarity and purpose, Skywalker summoned Cole's lightsaber and ignited the blue blade, ready to engage the Sith in combat. Out of sheer anger, Krayt struck by sending a barrage of Force lightning toward the renewed Cole Skywalker. But the Jedi intercepted the attack, using his lightsaber and mastery of the Force to absorb the attack, essentially rendering the Sith Lord's power useless. Then Darth Talon struck, understanding that she needed to kill her apprentice right then and there after failing to convert him to the dark side. But Talon lost to Cade once more as she was impaled in the abdomen without even giving a good chance at landing an attack on her former apprentice. The Sith Lady was rendered incapacitated the entire time, unable to prevent Skywalker from escaping. Meanwhile, Skywalker used the confusion to escape, fighting his way through numerous Sith warriors as he made his way to the top of the temple. Then there was one final obstacle. Darth Nihil was ready to cut off his escape, but instead of seeking revenge against the man who killed his father 7 years ago, Cade briefly dueled with him and cut his sword arm. Then he used a massive Force push to incapacitate the hand, opening the way for his escape. Eventually, Cade's friends, Delia and Jiraiya, appeared together with a familiar face to rescue him. The sacrifice paid off for Cade as his submission to the Sith bought the freedom for his friends and ultimately his own freedom. His crew had made contact with Morrigan Cord, Cade's mother, shortly after they were released by the One Sith. Together, they came up with a plan to use the Mynock to rescue Cade from Krayt and the rest of the Sith. As Cade was locked in combat with the Sith Lord, Cord, who was flying nearby on a rocket pack, shot Krayt in the back, opening an opportunity for him to hop on board the Mynock. As Cade escaped Coruscant, his mother urged him to run as far as he could. Throughout the chaos, Talon was essentially useless as she was pressing her hands to the wound in her stomach to keep pressure on it. She knew she was going to survive this latest ordeal because she had suffered worse things during her training. But what she could not stomach was the fact that she had failed once more. While Talon was still processing her latest failure, her master had ordered everyone to pursue the Jedi, but it was too late as Cade Skywalker had already escaped into hyperspace. But despite his anger, Krayt was still well aware of the fact that both his hands failed in their most important mission. He made sure to tell Talon that her failure would be dealt with once she was fully healed from her injuries. Chapter 9: The Betrayal. Darth Talon's latest defeat left her more injured than she had ever been in her entire life, as getting impaled by Skywalker's lightsaber nearly killed her. As such, the ordeal required her to spend time in a Bacta tank, recovering steadily as the Sith recalibrated their approach, especially with both Talon and Darth Nihil suffering grave injuries. But because of his failure against Cade Skywalker and the injuries he suffered, Nihil was replaced by Darth Strife, who had been previously Krayt's fist. Talon, however, recovered faster than Nihil because her injuries were not as severe as his. There was no rest for the weary because shortly after emerging from her tank, Talon was ready to face judgment for her failure in turning Cade over to the dark side. In truth, she expected execution because no Sith Lord would ever tolerate repeated failures from a trusted underling. Krayt was as angry as ever, even killing a few other Sith Lords who suggested that Talon was not entirely to blame for their failure to convert Skywalker. He even contemplated killing Talon as well. However, the situation throughout the greater galaxy influenced Krayt's decision. Cade Skywalker's bold escape from the Sith and footage of him wielding his father's lightsaber strengthened the galaxy's resolve against their oppressive rulers. Resistance movements were emboldened to renew the fight against the Sith. Meanwhile, the deposed Roan Fel's forces also began to believe they could resist their enemies and take over the Empire once more. There were also Jedi survivors who finally came out of hiding to strike at the Sith Empire's forces. As Krayt observed the situation, it became clear he needed every skilled Sith he could get his hands on. Talon's execution would have only weakened their hold on the galaxy, as she was still one of his most powerful underlings. Realizing Talon still had stealth and espionage skills no other Sith Lord possessed, Krayt assigned her to hunt down resistance cells. As she ruthlessly hunted down her master's enemies, the Force bond between her and Skywalker often manifested itself. She would sometimes see visions of her former apprentice, but could not quite work out his location. This connection, however, was neither intimate nor sentimental. For Talon, it only served as a way to hunt Skywalker down. However, when word of Skywalker's latest location reached the Sith, Talon joined her master in strife to the ancient mystic planet of Hadabadan, a world quite possibly linked to the Jedi Order's origins. They finally found their target on that planet, and Talon wasted no time engaging Cade Skywalker in a duel. But it was all a trap set by Cade, the Jedi Celeste Morn, and their allies to lure their enemies and defeat them right then and there. The duel between Talon and Cade was fierce, with the Sith Lady taunting the Jedi that he was closer to the dark side than he thought. However, Skywalker emerged victorious in their fight, leaving Talon incapacitated long enough for the Jedi to continue their plan. He defeated Strife. Meanwhile, Morn pushed Krayt off a cliff, with Cade believing that the fall had killed the Sith Lord. Krayt survived the fall. However, the fight with the Jedi and his injuries had weakened him to a point where he was vulnerable. True to the Sith's nature, Darth Warlock was ready to pounce on the man he once called his master. Warlock was widely regarded as the one Sith's second in command, possessing power and knowledge that was rivaled only by Krayt himself. But the most powerful Sith Lords could never be content with being second. After all, they crave power and control above everything else. In Warlock's case, he had simply been waiting for the perfect time to betray his master. With Krayt as his most vulnerable state, Warlock blasted him with Force Lightning, killing the Sith Emperor. However, he told the one Sith a different story. He used his powers over the dark side to manipulate Krayt's heart, while telling the rest of the Empire that their master had finally succumbed to the Yuuzhan Vong implants that had been killing him slowly. The Sith bought the story, and Warlock was quick to assume the throne. Talon, who had pledged her undying loyalty to Krayt long ago, was now forced to serve a different master. Chapter 10. Krayt Reborn. There was now a different order within the Sith. The one Sith, which relied heavily on one Supreme Sith Lord delegating powers to his underlings, was on the verge of collapse because of Krayt's death. Darth Warlock, as powerful as he was, struggled to maintain order within the Empire because not every Sith Lord bowed down to his rule, with some suddenly disappearing soon after he assumed the throne. Meanwhile, Darth Talon was now in a precarious position because her authority within the Empire stemmed directly from her status as Krayt's hand. The title now meant nothing because Krayt was gone. Warlock offered the same role to her if she were to swear loyalty to him. Initially, Talon did so because she still served the one Sith, but because Warlock sensed hesitation within the hand, he gave her a different task, one that kept her at an arm's length away from him. She was to stand guard over Darth Krayt's tomb and ordered to let no one in under any circumstances. Her loyalty to Krayt strengthened her resolve in her new mission, ensuring not even the Sith had access to her fallen master's body. Darth Nihil, however, was a skeptic. He had received a vision from Krayt himself, telling him that he was still alive. Darth Malady, meanwhile, convinced him to go to Krayt's tomb. At first, Talon's loyalty to the one Sith kept Nihil from accessing the tomb, but her loyalty to Krayt ultimately won her over, as she could not skip on the chance to, once again, serve her true master if ever indeed he was still alive. Shockingly, they both discovered that Krayt's body was not there. Only his armor remained. This reinforced their belief that their true master was still alive, and that Warlock was nothing more than just a mere pretender to the Sith throne. Together, the two former hands worked to try to uncover the truth behind their master's death and to expose Warlock's treachery. After all, they were both deeply loyal to Krayt. Talon herself swore absolute fealty to the fallen Sith Lord and wished nothing but to see him back on the throne of power. To that end, Talon used her stealth skills to mysteriously vanish from the Sith temple on Coruscant. Not even Nihil knew where she disappeared to. In truth, she traveled to the Sith's ancient homeworld of Korriban, which used to be the one Sith's seat of power before taking over the galaxy. Talon ventured deep into Korriban's tombs to find her master alive and well. Krayt did not waste time in telling his most loyal hand that he had resurrected himself through the dark side, and that his rebirth had begun. Meanwhile, Nihil eventually found Talon, believing she had betrayed the Empire. He attacked the Hand, only to be surprised by the intervention of his former master. Nihil understood that there was something darker and deeper going on, so he and Talon followed Krayt deeper into Korriban's tomb to discover that the Sith Lord had been breeding a new type of Sith trooper, completely loyal to him and devoid of any free will. These warriors were to be the Sith's new fighting force in the war to come. But first, there was the issue of the Pretender. Krayt then used his power to infuse his will into the dark side. Everyone who had touched the dark side of the Force were told by the Sith Lord that he had returned, and that he was ready to reclaim his power. Talon accompanied her master, Nihil, and two of Krayt's Sith troopers back to Coruscant to reclaim the throne. They cut their way through Warlock's Sith loyalists until Krayt reached the traitor. While Talon and Nihil dueled anyone who threatened their master's return to power, Krayt went one-on-one with Warlock, eventually destroying the usurper. Darth Krayt was now back in power, and Talon once again served by his side as his hand. Chapter 11. Hunting the Jedi. Darth Warlock's betrayal proved to be an unnecessary distraction, as it not only took their attention away from the Jedi Order, but also allowed Skywalker and the other Jedi to muster up their forces for the war. So by the time Darth Krayt returned to power, he did not know where to start or how to find the Jedi. That was when Talon's gifts were once again invaluable. She worked together with Darth Havoc, a former Imperial Knight, to try to break the captured Imperial Knight Antares Draco. They created a Force illusion that messed with Draco's mind. Then, to make the illusion more convincing, Havoc projected an illusion onto Talon to make her look like Princess Marasiah Fel. Talon's acting skills paid off, as her skills in deception allowed her to convince Draco she was actually the princess. Havoc made the illusion more convincing by threatening Draco to kill the disguised Talon if he did not tell them any valuable information. With that, Draco finally broke and told them of a Jedi hidden temple on Tavis. As Havoc continued to torture Draco and eventually froze him in carbonite, Talon quickly left to report to her master that they now had a solid lead. Upon learning of the hidden Jedi temple, Krayt understood what he needed to do. This was the biggest concentration of Jedi since the massacre of Ossus. Similarly, this was their final chance to destroy the Jedi Order once and for all, as every important Jedi who had survived the massacre years ago would have been on Tavis. Meanwhile, Krayt told Talon to give Draco to Skywalker as a gift and as a sign of his eagerness to meet him in combat once more. She went to the Wheel, where Cade was to meet with his mother. Talon secretly snuck on board the Mynock and left Draco's frozen body there, but before she could escape, she engaged Cade in a duel, barely making it out alive as they were set to meet once more in the future. With no time to spare, Krayt assembled a massive force that would finish what he started years ago on Ossus. Talon commanded one of the attack forces composed of Sith warriors and troopers, ready to wreak havoc through the Jedi's defenses. However, unlike the massacre of Ossus, where the Jedi were unprepared for a surprise attack, the Jedi were more than ready to meet the Sith. They had set up their defenses composed of fields of fire and force barriers. The Sith had them outnumbered 10-1, but the Jedi were determined to hold the line, as this was to be the decisive battle of their age-long rivalry. Initially, their defense seemed to work because Tavis had a natural advantage against attack forces. However, what turned the tide in favor of the Sith was the arrival of Darth Nihil, who led a battalion of Krayt's new breed of Sith troopers. They utterly overwhelmed the battlefield, causing the Jedi to understand they were fighting a losing battle. Meanwhile, Talon proved useful, going up against new and familiar faces alike. She briefly dueled Shadow Val, who had now been promoted to Jedi Master. While she made easy work of Val during their first duel, Talon struggled more in their second meeting as she was unable to kill him. Val, however, was forced to retreat as it became clear that the Jedi, despite their valiant efforts, were severely outnumbered and outgunned in that fight. The Jedi and their allies signaled a planet-wide retreat and were utterly useless against the onslaught, especially because Cade was not there to even the odds. Val and the others managed to escape, but they unfortunately left several allies to die at the hands of the Sith. Cade returned to the planet a bit too late as he rushed back to Tyvus upon sensing the attack through the Force. But while he tried his best to create an opening for his allies to escape, he lost another valuable member of the family. Nat Skywalker, who adopted the alias Rock, was the older brother of Cole Skywalker. However, he left Ossus years ago to build the secret temple on Tyvus, which ultimately became a refuge for the Jedi who survived the Sith's attack. Nat found his nephew, Cade, protecting Jedi Master Tarasa, who was engaged in battle meditation to combat the Sith's overwhelming numbers. However, Nat and Sa sacrificed themselves not only to protect Cade, but to deal a critical blow to the Sith, weakening their enemies enough to allow the younger Skywalker to escape. The Sith was once more victorious against the Jedi. Meanwhile, for Talon, this was her first true win against the Forces of Light in a very long time, as she went through a long losing streak against Cade Skywalker throughout their many encounters. Then again, the Jedi's efforts on Tyvus proved invaluable as they weakened the Sith well enough for a decisive counterattack. Chapter 12: The Fall of Krayt and the One Sith. The loss of their hidden temple on Tyvus was a massive blow to the Jedi's morale, as they not only lost their refuge, but also plenty of allies. However, they regrouped on Bastion, where it had been decided that they needed to take the fight to the Sith instead of simply waiting for another attack that would eventually spell their doom. This time, instead of sending the full force of their alliance, the Jedi resolved to send a small strike team composed of their best warriors. It was the right time to strike because the attack on Tyvus had crippled Coruscant's defenses. Led by Cade Skywalker, this team was composed of Wolf Sazin, Shadow Val, Morrigan Cord, Ganner Krieg, Aslan Ray, and Siegel Dare. This was the best the Alliance had to offer against an entire Sith Empire that was not expecting the Jedi to be so bold in their approach. The strike team infiltrated the Sith Temple, eventually making their way to Krayt's location. But the Sith Lord was not without protection. All his loyal underlings were there to protect him, ready to give their lives to their master. Talon, Darth Strife, and Darth Nihil flanked Darth Krayt, defending him from all sides. Of course, the quickest was the first to strike at the Jedi as Talon engaged Skywalker in combat. She was ready for this moment. After all, she was trained from childhood to that day to act as one of Krayt's protectors. Her loyalty was absolute, and she knew she had to one day act not only as her master's hand, but also her shield against the Jedi if ever they were to threaten the One Sith's existence. Even if she knew a meeting with Skywalker and the best the Jedi had to offer would lead to her death, she still relented because of her undying loyalty to her master. To that end, Talon used a combination of lightsaber skills and the Force against Cade, only for Skywalker to easily overpower her. It had become obvious that the gap between them had become wider than ever. While Skywalker almost always had the upper hand against Talon in their previous meetings, this was now different because he was now far stronger. Talon quickly understood the situation. For the first time, she truly feared for Krayt's life, as it was clear that Cade had become incredibly powerful and may have already surpassed the most powerful Sith Lord of that era. But while she warned Krayt about Skywalker's growth, her warnings fell on deaf ears. Cade had already begun to engage Krayt in combat before Talon could completely warn her master about the massive growth in Skywalker's powers. She could not do anything but become a mere witness to a battle between two Force users who were in an entirely different league compared to the rest of them. Krayt used every bit of power he accumulated throughout his life, unleashing his full strength on Skywalker. Meanwhile, Cade fought with the legacy of every Skywalker who had fought and defeated the Sith before him. In the end, Cade proved victorious, as Talon and her fellow loyalists could only bear to watch their master's heart getting pierced by Skywalker's lightsaber. Then, to ensure Krayt would never bring himself back from the dead, Cade hurled his body to Coruscant's sun using the Force. Krayt was no more, and the One Sith was left in disarray following the death of their master. The death of the Sith Lord sent shockwaves throughout Coruscant. His new breed of Sith troopers began to act confused as they no longer had a master to serve. Meanwhile, the rest of the Sith lords and ladies who loyally served Krayt since childhood were left without a clear direction. As the Sith Empire crumbled without its emperor, Darth Talon, Darth Nihil, and all the other survivors of that attack on Coruscant retreated. Nihil had now assumed the role of the One Sith's leadership to ensure that their master's legacy would live on. However, he neither had the power nor the influence that Krayt had. Nevertheless, Talon and the others disappeared into different parts of the vast galaxy as the Galactic Federation Triumvirate rose to take the Empire's place. Talon's ultimate fate remained unknown as the Sith disappeared. But before disappearing, Nihil ordered every Sith to infiltrate different parts of the Triumvirate's government. True to her nature as the One Sith's best assassin, Talon could be waiting and hiding in plain sight, ready to strike at the Jedi once more when the time was right.